All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. First off, thank you to everyone for your generosity in allowing us to move this by a half hour. We were all stuck in massive traffic, and so we are here now. And I just want to say that we are going to call the board meeting to order. It's the July 16th board workshop of North County Transit. Before we begin, members of the public who may be viewing the meeting on NCTD's YouTube page, please note that in order to make a public comment during the meeting, you must connect to the meeting using the Zoom link provided on the agenda. In addition, you must also register by sending an email containing your name or phone number and the agenda item on which you wish to speak to clerk@nctd.org. We'll go ahead and do a verbal roll call attendance, and I will pass that over to Ms. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Madam Chair Patel.
Here.
Vice Chair Sinella.
Here.
Board Member Martinez.
Here.
Board Member O'Hara.
Here.
Member Garcia.
Here.
Board Member Joyce is participating remotely under provisions of the Brown Act, and the teleconference location has been published on the agenda. Board Member Joyce, can you provide an audible confirmation of your presence, please?
I'm here.
Thank you. Board Member Desmond. Board Member Edson.
Present.
Board Member Contreras.
Present.
Board Alternate Coleman.
Here.
Thank you. This completes the roll call with Board Member Joyce participating remotely and Board Member Desmond absent.
All right, thank you. Board Alternate Coleman, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Ms. Rodriguez will now provide us with a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Okay. In case of an emergency, I will dial 911. In case of evacuation, please take the stairs. Do not use the elevators. Once cleared of the building, do not re-enter unless cleared to do so by emergency personnel. There are fire extinguishers and first aid kits on each floor of the building. There is a portable defibrillator on the first and third floors of this building, and staff on hand trained on CPR procedures if needed. This concludes my safety brief.
Great, thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, the agenda was revised to include the teleconference location for Board Member Joyce's remote participation, and the updated agenda was sent to the board and posted on the NCTD website.
Great, thank you. And moving on to public communications, do we have any general public comments today?
We do not, Madam Chair.
All right, at this time, public registration to provide general public comment will end. Before we proceed, we'll discuss some protocol items. First, I'll ask board members to please hold your comments and questions until after each agenda item has been presented. When the time comes for questions or comments, please raise your hand and wait until you are called upon to speak. Lastly, please turn on and speak into your microphone when it is your turn to speak. This will ensure that your comments are heard for those listening to the meeting online. So our first item on the agenda is an overview of the low-income fare freeze program that was recently proposed by the San Diego Metropolitan Transit System. Mary Dover, our Chief Operating Officer, Bus, will present this item. So Ms. Dover, you have our attention.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. I'm going to be up here for a while, so you get used to. For this presentation, I have with me Alicia Pete Watson. She's our Director of Customer Experience and a fares expert. So any question that I might not be able to answer, she'll be able to step in. Okay, so just providing a little bit of background for the board. As you'll recall, NCTD, MTS, and SANDAG started the process to evaluate any potential impacts of a fare increase on ridership and revenues last summer. SANDAG is the administrator of the regional fare ordinance, and so they're a key player in this, and the final decision will be made at SANDAG's Transportation Committee because the Board of Directors has delegated that authority over to the Transportation Committee. So in April of 2026, the NCTD Board recommended approval of changes to the fare ordinance that included a fare increase. MTS's board did the same in April. As part of our board discussion, the board did express support for exploring in the future a low-income fare, which leads us to this item today. In June 2026, MTS's board approved a low-income fare freeze program as part of their budget discussion. Also in June, Sandag's Transportation Committee voted to waive the first reading and all future readings of the fare ordinance. This was a first administrative step in the approval of changes to the fare ordinance. Tomorrow, Sandag's Transportation Committee will vote on whether or not to approve the changes to the fare ordinance. So this is a very timely discussion. So a little bit about MTS's low-income fare freeze program. It would keep fares at current levels for individuals that are actively enrolled in the following programs intended to assist low-income individuals: CalFresh, Medi-Cal, and CalWorks. This fare freeze will apply to adult fares only. So that would be one-way fares. As it's structured now, MTS bus and trolley, and the current fare structure in that category also includes NCTD, Breeze, and Sprinter. Depending on the board conversation today, we could have a conversation about MTS separating from that so that it only applies to trolley and bus, but as it stands now, it would apply to Breeze and Sprinter as well. The eligibility of this program would be managed and maintained by NCTD and MTS. Initially, we would gather documents to verify eligibility in the program, and then we would have an ongoing process where we would determine if somebody is still eligible for the program or not. Per MTS's board conversation, this fare freeze program would become eligible on October 1st, 2026, if the Sandag Transportation Committee approves the changes to the regional fare ordinance tomorrow. And I'll just highlight a little bit about that piece. The changes to the regional fare ordinance allow NCTD and MTS to develop their own promotional or special fare programs. The current ordinance does not allow for that. And so if the Sandag Transportation Committee does not approve the changes to the ordinance tomorrow, NCTD and MTS would have to go back to the drawing board on how we would provide a low-income fare. A few things to consider in this conversation. The fare increase as recommended by the NCTD and MTS's board for approval by the Sandag Transportation Committee does include a phased approach. Fares would slightly increase this October, and then there would be a higher increase next October, phase 1 and phase 2. The anticipated revenues that NCTD would expect to get in addition to the revenues that we're already receiving right now from fares, in phase 1, we're anticipated to receive approximately an extra $600,000. If NCTD decided to participate in the low-income fare freeze program, we could expect to receive about $400,000 less. This is an estimate of revenues. The initial estimate was based off of a model that Sandag prepared for us that took into account the revenue that would be generated from increased fares, less the amount of ridership that we could expect to lose, because anytime you raise prices, you can expect to lose some riders. We tried to emulate that same model in determining what the low-income fare freeze program would impact in terms of ridership. However, these are estimates at this point. Because we would be freezing fares at current levels, we can expect to have a lesser loss in ridership from the fare increase, if that makes sense. Similarly, in phase 2, we were anticipated to receive an increase of about $1.2 million in fare revenues. If we participated in the low-income fare freeze program, we could expect to receive about $600,000 less from the fare increase. With that, I will take any questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much on that. Do we have any public comments at this time?
We do not.
Okay, at this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. So I'm going to look to my fellow colleagues and see if there are any questions or comments regarding the item. Okay, I see Ms. Contreras, so I'll start off with you. I don't see any others yet. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for this update. Okay, so NCTD currently, can you explain to me if we are collecting any kind of documents for CalFresh, Medi-Cal, or CalWorks, or is this a new process?
This would be a new process. We currently don't
Okay.
accept any of those.
But MTS has been doing that for a while, or no?
No, this would be a new process for them.
Across the board? Okay. And since this is a new process and we're looking at this being effective October 1st, when do we, I mean, say we go down the route where we do a fare freeze like this, what's the first day that we can anticipate that we can take documents in for review?
Yeah, so MTS is working with their fare system contractor in it. I'm sure that is one of their questions. I'm not sure if we've settled on a date that we would start assessing eligibility, but it would have to be before the October 1st date so that we can make sure that when the October 1st hits, the fare goes into effect and we can make sure that those folks are eligible. So I would assume it would probably be sometime in September.
Okay. And on our side, talk to me about our staffing levels versus needing to contract.
I'm piggyback on what Mary was talking about with the work that Init is going to be doing with MTS. We do our eligibility processes different here at North County. We do ours in person, while customers are still encouraged to go to ridebono.com for their eligibility of reduced fare, or if this should pass, the same. Their process is done third party. Ours is done in-house. So customers, it would just be duplicative of the current process that we're doing right now. In terms of staffing, we're not anticipating a huge lift in the long run. However, when we launched Pronto in 2021, we did see quite a few, because we do ours in person and in that moment, and you don't need to go through technology. We did see overflow at our 3 transit centers at Vista, Escondido, and Oceanside, where customers were coming up to verify eligibility in that moment. So we're anticipating once word gets out that would likely happen again, but probably on a smaller scale since Pronto is a much larger regional effort.
Okay.
Alicia,
Yeah.
can you introduce yourself for the record?
Oh, I'm Alicia P. Watson.
And what do
I
you
think
do?
Mary said it at the top,
Oh, okay.
but here I am again.
We just wanted to make sure down on this end.
Yes.
Okay, that's really important to know, kind of where we start off. So folks go in person to the customer service, and we're only anticipating one spot, or are we at 3 spots? Okay, where are those located?
They're at our transit centers, currently at Vista Transit Center, Oceanside, and Escondido.
Okay,
And office hours are Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So we can we can verify eligibility within those windows.
okay. So, I mean, if we went down this route, I think it's just really critical that we utilize our social media to really advertise when and where folks can get, and what the process is. If we could get it just to a simple 1, 2, 3, process, folks are gonna, be probably confused about what kind of documentation they need to bring. If folks call, is there a number to call on the phone to kind of like pre-process and like set up an application or an appointment or anything like that, or is it just walk in?
It's walk-in, it's first come, first serve availability. And yes, there is a phone number that they would be encouraged to call. It's customer service.
Okay, and they would just get walked through what kind of things they need to bring.
Exactly.
And then this is something I've brought up in the past, but when it comes to being able to have our large customer base, which speaks a variety of languages, what is our language capacity for multilingual customer service?
So we do have a language line that customers, if we do encounter language outside of what staff, which over half of our staff are Spanish speakers, and we ensure that we've got a Spanish speaker at our transit centers at front counter window. When at the first of the month when we sell our fare product, but they're on hand at all times. We do have to use the language assistance line, and it is available to all of staff if we do encounter someone that speaks another language.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think just as we roll this out, what I would like to see, I mean, if we go that route, I would like to see just some data points as to, how many people were, initiated the process versus how many people completed the process, and, anything else that you think is relevant. But I think those, at minimum, those two things for me are important because I want to see if there's a drop off, and kind of help to decrease obstacles for folks if possible. Let me see. Okay, and then the last thing for me is the $613,524 in lost revenue that was pointed out. But let me see if I got this straight. So when we're comparing this loss in revenue because of the fare freeze, when we do the analysis and we're looking at what the loss in revenue would be, even if we didn't do the fare freeze, but because we're anticipating a loss in ridership, it seems as though those numbers are kind of a wash. Did I understand that? It's around 600,000?
Yeah, so we did, the initial projections had that ridership loss baked in.
Yeah.
So the 600,000 in phase one and the 1.2 million in phase two did anticipate that we would lose some ridership. And this was still the anticipated amount of revenue that we would have generated even with the ridership loss.
Okay.
So we did, because we're not really sure how many riders we would keep or potentially gain with a fare freeze program, it is just an estimate.
Right.
But Yoni Chalakovar, Director of Service Planning, put together this estimate, and so I would bet money on it. So it would be, so under the phase two scenario, instead of $1.2 million in extra revenue, we can expect about $600,000 in extra revenue.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think that's just, that's going to be another data point that's going to be important for us to track, and to really dig in, so that we can see whether those estimates are correct. And, hopefully we're able to actually gain ridership, which would be fantastic. But I just got to tell my board, I'm 100% in favor of moving in this direction, especially because we know that public transit is a critical support for folks that need to get to work, need to get to school, need to get to their health care. Transportation is a huge social determinant of health. And we understand that our mission here at NCTD is to ensure that we provide really good public transportation. And, the economic situation on the ground doesn't look like it's going to get better for folks, especially folks that have already been vulnerable. I see them becoming even more vulnerable to outside things that they cannot control. So it's critical for NCTD to continue to be providing amazing customer service and transportation solutions to the North County area. So thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I've been a proponent and have pushed for us to take a look at initiating a low-income fare system, not just here at NCTD, but at MTS and through SANDAG, because that's the process that we need to go through. So hopefully we will have, a unanimous conversation about how we can move forward to help the most amount of people stay connected to where they need to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? Vice Chair Sinella?
Yeah, thank you both for the presentation. Appreciate the information. I don't want to oversimplify it, but this seems kind of easy. Like, why hasn't this been done before? This seems like this is going to be about a 10-minute discussion and boom, we're going to move forward. So what am I missing?
So it has been done before.
Okay.
I was going to jump in on that. I was fairly surprised that this came through MTS's board. One of their board members tried to make the comment that this really isn't a revenue loss. You're still gaining revenue because you're not losing revenue over your previous revenue. The current place where this is happening is on a commuter rail line. The demographics are significantly different for how their finances are impacted compared to how we or MTS would be impacted. In fact, I believe MTS is having a meeting this week, next week?
This morning.
This morning. I don't know if their numbers came out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they weren't too far off of ours. And it pretty much negates the reality for why we needed a fare increase in the first place. I think that the discussion that we had at the board meeting a few months ago, and I really appreciate your comments, that I do think there's a certain income level that we need to take a look at. When you take, just take CalFresh, for example. CalFresh's max for one person is like $2,750 or $3,000. That's $30,000 a year. Our threshold was really supposed to be somewhere around, we were going to look at 10 to 15. I think those numbers are significantly different, right? Like if we're really talking about somebody that needs help in the 10 to 15,000 range, what does that look like in terms of the fare increase? I certainly do think that from an ease of management standpoint, it's easier for us to just say, okay, if you're on CalFresh, you're on one of these things, like just show us your card, show us your approval, we can move on with that. But each one of those sort of has a different income threshold, and some are fairly high. And would probably put us in a situation where, riders that were in some cases making up to $50,000 a year, maybe a little less, would be eligible for the reduced fare. So I'm certainly not in favor of the plan. I just think that for MTS to reach and grab one agency that doesn't really have a lot of corollary between what MTS and NCTD were doing with not a lot of information behind that was not a good move. I think, I don't know, when they dug into the numbers this morning, what it looked like.
Yeah, they anticipated to see less of an increase in revenue, pretty consistent with what ours was. It was
about two-thirds.
Two-thirds of what they had anticipated to receive initially in the fare increase versus what they would receive with the fare freeze.
And I'm not necessarily here nor there on that decision. I just think they just grabbed one example and really stuck to it as a board. And then they had a pretty robust discussion about it last month. And then, the caveat to that, I think, is what Mary said, which is if the fare increase ordinance changes don't pass, then neither one of us can do that because right now we do not have the ability independently to sort of create a new fare. That is all part and parcel to moving that forward. And I'm not suggesting we don't use this plan. I'm not suggesting we don't do that. I just think I think to your point, we sort of need to see what that FTE load looks like for us, who sort of maintains that information. Is it as simple as somebody just bringing us a card and we look at that card? And I do think we need a little bit of time to vet that. I really liked the previous approach of hey, let's figure out for our most distressed. And I don't disagree with you. I think that number is going to continue to rise. And I think we need to figure out how to sort of manage that in real time. And I'm just putting that out there as information. It's not my endorsement or non-endorsement of whatever the board wants to do. It's just, it was weird that they pulled that one example. And I think the reason they pulled it, and rightfully so, is it's easy to manage that in theory because we're not the ones really we're not really the ones that are vetting income. We're not vetting these things. We're just saying oh, you're already on a program that sort of puts guardrails around that. Okay, we recognize that. Let's move forward. So as long as we can figure out how to do that sort of internally, I don't disagree that it's definitely something we should look into. We just need to be, I think, thoughtful about what that really means regionally when we're talking about fares.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the additional context, and I'll just kind of wrap up with my comments. I think this whole exercise is an honorable effort by the board, and I can definitely see the importance to have the discussion. If this was a one-person board, I'd like to offer transportation for free for everyone, right? But with a couple caveats, and it's the same caveat for the discussion that we're having today, and that is so long as staff believes that we can continue to maintain all of our modes of transportation that we provide, and that we can continue to pay our employees fairly. If we can do those two things, But let's do it for as least expensive and try to help as many people that we possibly can. But I'm going to always defer to staff's recommendation on these types of things because they know the economics of the agency better than any of us. And if they tell us that they can support a program like this, I'll support it. If they tell us that they can't, then I won't support it.
Yeah, I think from our seat, we just need a little more time to look at it because we haven't really completely vetted what this looks like now that we kind of know.
I'm gonna put my hand back in line.
Okay, are you done? Okay, and then
If I
yes, so go
jump
for
in
it,
real
and then I
quick? Yeah.
see alternate Coleman, and then, yes, I'll go back around. I don't know if there were others. Did you raise your hand as well? Okay, Board Member O'Hara. So we'll go, if you don't mind, do you mind if I go to Board Member O'Hara after, or did you need to respond? Oh man. Okay, I'll just, you know what, Board Member O'Hara, I'll come back to you after. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so just because you mentioned staff's recommendation, I did want to highlight that in this item in particular, we did not make a staff recommendation. We wanted to provide this to the board as information. What I will say is, because Sandag's Transportation Committee meeting is tomorrow, if a decision is made by the board today, then I will share that at the Transportation Committee tomorrow. And if we want to participate in the program starting October 1st, we will need to get an answer to MTS relatively soon. The other financial, and kind of getting back to your original question about, seems like a slam dunk, why didn't we do this earlier? I think one of the reasons why staff didn't recommend this as part of the fare change process is just because of the revenue impacts. We never anticipated that a fare increase was going to be the end-all be-all solution for some of the revenue challenges that we have in the future, but it is an important piece because it's dedicated revenue that comes directly to us. We can use it for whatever we'd like, a lot of those really operational things, and we wanted to build that up and have that continue as a sustainable source of revenue. So all of that is still, if the board does or doesn't do this, neither one of those is going to break or make us. I think it's just, we brought this to the board with no staff recommendation because it really, in our view, is a policy choice that should be, directed from the board to us.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I do think as we go through this, I'm going to be listening to, I know that staff might be reluctant to make a recommendation, I understand that, but the finances are going to make or break this whole thing for us, right? And I really do want to hear some level of confidence from staff before I vote yes on this. And I'm certainly inclined to vote yes on this if staff is comfortable. But again, I want to make sure that we can maintain the greater system, right? And then paying our employees fairly is very important to me.
Okay, I'm going to go back down the line. So I had Board
I'll be
Alternate
quick.
Coleman, then Board Member Contreras, and Board Member O'Hara, then Board Member Edson. So,
Thanks for the presentation. I see a lot of similarities in YOP, which of course is wildly successful and has increased ridership as a result. My question is really meticulous, but it's my job to be meticulous, so I'll ask it anyway. And it's really because of communication to those who may be using this program. It says that individuals are actively enrolled in the following programs. I think I know the answer, but is it all 3 programs or one of the programs?
Any of the 3 programs. So they don't have to be enrolled in all 3, but those are the 3 programs that
Got it.
we
Okay,
will determine makes them eligible.
I'll make a recommendation that is made more clear.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
thank you, Board Member Contreras, and then I'll come to Board Member O'Hara.
Yeah, okay. So we don't have to start October 1st.
No, we do not. The only thing that I'll highlight is if we didn't start, so because right now MTS only has a regional, well, we only have as a region a regional fare product that includes both bus services, trolley and Sprinter. If they were to do it without us, they would have to create a separate pass for just their riders, and we would have to create a separate pass for just our riders. So not a make or break, a little bit annoying for MTS, but we can make it work if we decide not to participate starting October 1st.
Okay. And, I mean, this is, I understand going with like the simplicity of other applications for programs that folks that are impacted economically, go through, and being able to utilize that documentation for quick verification, showing hardship. But I still do wonder about that part of the bar graph that was shown, which really looked at the 15,000 K and less. I just don't really even know what kind of, if folks are going to have documentation showing that, Do we think that staff would have the ability, with the time that we have available between now and sometime before October 1st, to look at both situations where if we're going to continue, like we have to evaluate, full-time employees versus contract, looking at the capacity, would it be something that staff could do to see whether or not we can do an income base at 20K or less for a fair reduction, and present that and compare that to the CalFresh, Medi-Cal, and CalWorks scenario. So it'd be scenario A and scenario B. And I would assume that both those things, are going to need a more detailed process, but that there could be a similar lift in staff capacity for either one of those. And I'm just curious, because I really do want to be very surgical when it comes to what our fares look like, because I just do have concern that, some of the goals that we have as an agency, we won't be able to meet if we just don't have enough operational dollars, which is something that we continue to struggle. And so you did say something that was really key to me, which is the fare recovery, fare box recovery that we get is they're unattached dollars, which we really, really need, because we can get money for capital things, but we're constantly struggling with operations. And what I want folks to understand is that operation dollars equals frequency. Frequency equals reliability. And at the end of the day, we really need to have a fast, reliable, and safe system. And I think that we've made a lot of efforts as a board and as an agency to make our system safer and invest in those safety precautions and personnel. We've done, a better job of getting different modes of service that really meet people where they're at. And we've seen that with NCTD Plus, and I want to continue to be able to have other communities experience how amazing microtransit is through NCTD. And, we have done a great job of trying to balance our budget when we have these externalities like fuel and war that are just making our expenses so high. So I would love to see, and hopefully the board would be responsive, and we can give this direction in a strong form to our staff so that there's no ambiguity. I would really love to see a scenario A, which we can just look at, what MTS is doing, and then a scenario B, which is the NCTD way, which might be more surgical and help us continue to provide the type of customer service and reliability that our population needs and deserves, especially as we grow, especially as our commercial centers, our educational campuses, our business centers continue to grow. So that's what I wanted to add. I really appreciate the board for all the robust discussion and comments in meetings prior, and this meeting included. But I want to offer the board a look at these two different scenarios, since we don't have to be tied to what MTS is doing. Thank you.
I really appreciate those comments, and I'll give you an example of where exactly what you're saying kind of became a problem with us, and that's on Youth Opportunity Pass. I think that we currently have a barrier to getting youth the free rides that they need, regardless of the explosion, right? Like over the last 4 years on youth, I mean, we went from 90,000 4 years ago, almost 100,000 to almost 1.7 new record this year for us at like 1.4 million in youth rides that we can tabulate. I'm fairly certain there's more than that and there's more opportunity. One of the barriers that we have on the YOP is that we have to have someone come and see us and we got to vet this thing, and that's part of our agreement with Sandag and all these things. Historically, where I've been, we just put a button on the fare box. And when a kid got on the bus, you know, they showed us their school ID, and if they had a school ID, we hit the button and we let them on. The end. And then we figured out how to manage that backwards. This is a similar situation where I think exactly to your point, there's a financial impact to us if we go with option A, but it is the easier option for us to manage, right? As a regional, because all we're really asking for is like, hey, show us your previous credentials. The other one will be a little more labor intensive from an FTE standpoint, but in the long run could generate additional revenue, well, would stave off revenue loss out of the fare increase. And so I think we would have no problem whatsoever bringing both of those options back to the table. And I totally agree with you, right? It's like the easiest way to go is option A because it takes the load off of NCTD, but there's a financial risk to that. Option B would require us to sort of reimagine what that looks like for our customer service team to try to vet what that looks like. And one of the barriers would be, to your point, I think, anybody who's sort of in that 20 or 15,000 range maybe doesn't have a W-2, maybe doesn't have verifiable income. And so we don't really have a way to effectively manage that. And we may be locking people off the system that do need access to that range of transportation. And so very much appreciate those comments, and we'll figure it out. We'll get a couple options together. We'll get them back to the board and make sure we get them in front of the board.
Thank you, Board Member O'Hara, and then Board Member Edson.
I think you just kind of touched on some of the questions I was going to ask, actually. In these numbers, the cost to operate, there's, now I'm hearing there's two scenarios we're kind of throwing around, basically. Okay. And of the $400,000 and $600,000, of course, I closed that page on the freeze program, the less revenue. Are those, which option is that under? Which does that include?
Yeah, so it's the, so when the board made the recommendation back in April, they recommended a phased approach. So phase
Right.
one is just what would go into effect in October 2026. And then phase two is just what would go into effect on October 2027.
Okay. And so when that comes back, we'll get the actual costs, the numbers to operate and the two different systems.
Yes, so when the fare, assuming the Transportation Committee tomorrow approves the changes to the fare ordinance, phase one will start in October of 2026. And so then we'll start gathering those revenues and we'll be able to, when we come back to the board in July for the FY27 budget, we'll be able to have a better, FY28 budget, we'll have a better picture of the actual increases in revenues that we've gotten.
Okay, yeah, and so it's kind of not clear what that cost will be and what the heavy lift will be. Okay, it's kind of where I was asking. Okay, great, I appreciate that. And I kind of, lean with the direction of my fellow members up here and on the board who I do think something left out of this conversation is the big picture of the challenge of getting people on public transportation. And we're kind of isolating it to fare freezing in this and fare costs in this conversation. And the challenge, and we're going to see it later in this meeting today, right? We're going to talk about watch routes and routes that are cut and services that are cut, is really multi-pronged and not just what's the cost to get on the bus. If it doesn't go where you want to go or as frequently as you need it to go, what's wrong? So I do want to say I agree with my board members. I would lean towards, really staff's recommendations and input and the hard work you're doing on this. And I would also lean towards the rest of the board and say, just remember, we need people to get on this and need it to be useful. So we don't want to cut off our nose to spite our face if we're not careful. I do have concerns that this program could do that if not implemented correctly.
Thank you. I know we have Board Member Edson, then I'll come to Board Member Martinez.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you everyone for your comments, because I appreciate everyone's comments. So the board's unanimous decision to move forward with the regional fare change ordinance included sending the letter to Sandag to explore low-income fares, and then the board discussed, in fact, Karina, I believe it was you, or excuse me, Board Member Contreras, I believe it was you, that had really recommended that we run at that time with an income-based discount and to examine that. Sandag hasn't had an opportunity to come back to us with any of that. So it was quite a surprise. I attended the Transportation Committee meeting when this matter, like the night before, we found that MTS Board had voted to take this step. And it was pretty surprising because there had been a long negotiation time between the two agencies and Sandag to get to the point of a regional fare change, right? It was brave, but maybe they did a little bit of a leap without a look. And, I think it could come back and haunt them because as you mentioned, and as I always talk about, having frequency, reliability, et cetera, is key to public transit. And if we can't do that, we're actually hurting, if we take funding away, we could actually hurt our core ridership as well by not setting parameters that really do help those who need the help most. So I agree with pretty much everything I've heard from the board here. I know this item is just a discussion item. There's no motion to be made unless we choose to do so, but I think we need more information to move forward, and we don't have that. So I agree. Let's look at a couple of different scenarios, come back to the board with that information, and so that we can make an informed decision and not leap before we look.
Thank you, Board Member Edson. Board Member Martinez?
Yeah, I agree with what's being said. I just wanted a couple of clarifying questions. So the three low-income programs, the CalFresh, Medi-Cal, and CalWorks, who decided on those programs as being eligible? Was that us or was that MTS?
No, that was the direction of the MTS board.
Okay. And then in those three programs, is there a income level to be able to be enrolled in each one of those, and is it different?
I would have to get back to you on the specific levels for each of those programs, but yes, they do have, that was one of the, negotiation between MTS staff and the board, is that they wanted some type of low-income program quickly, and because these programs already do an income verification, that takes the onus off of staff. Because MTS's board wanted this to go into effect with the fare change, that allowed MTS staff, at least, these agencies already are specialized in income verification, and so that would take the onus off the staff.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, CalFresh, I know for sure. I think all three of them are pretty close. My numbers may be off slightly here, but CalFresh, I believe, was like $26.75 for one and $56.40 for a household of four. Medi-Cal and CalWorks, I think, are very similar. And these three were pulled from the other agency who does exactly the same program, correct?
I do not recall. I'll have to get back to you on
Okay.
that.
Because MTS essentially mirrored it off of, I think the discussion at the board meeting was, give us an example of another agency that does this. And they said, here you go. And they used these three as sort of their state identifier for them.
But it's possible for somebody to have even a lower income and not be enrolled in any of these programs, is
It
that
is,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
Right, if somebody does not seek these programs out, then, right, they wouldn't be eligible. And similarly with us, if there could be low-income riders that don't seek out this benefit from us as well.
May I just ask on that
Sure.
point? I'm just curious, from the income compatibility standpoint, is that at a state level that they looked at those numbers, or is it a regional median income? Because it would definitely vary.
Yeah, it is, it's a gross monthly income of at or below 200% of the federal poverty level.
And then my next question, will Sandag be voting on both the fare increase and the low income
No,
together,
they're,
or just the one increase?
yeah, they're just
Okay.
voting on the fare they're just voting on the changes to the fare ordinance. So the changes to the fare ordinance include the increase in fares, but they also include some policy language changes in the ordinance, one of which is allowing the transit agencies to do their own type of special promotional programs.
Okay.
And so although they're not voting on the low-income program in practice, they're voting on providing NCTD and MTS the eligibility to do our own.
Okay, all right, thank you.
If I might, also the eligibility to do things like NCTD Plus and have different fares there. So it's a pretty big, yeah.
So I'm so impatient. Do we know how they're leaning for tomorrow?
Yeah. Are you talking about MTS or are you talking about TC?
No, yeah,
I have not heard too much concern out of TC. In fact, the presentation that was given the last go-around with Mary and the team at MTS, I thought went pretty well. In fact, there were a lot of good questions. I thought Mayor Sanchez from Oceanside asked a lot of good questions. I thought people were very engaged in the interactive process. I do think that members of MTS's board that were involved in TC created some misdirection that needed to be resolved in the meeting. I thought Sandag did a good job of solving that problem in real time. I don't foresee this to be an issue. I know there were some questions at the board meeting, but I don't anticipate any issues at TC.
Okay. Anybody else before I have some questions and comments to go through? I see Board Member Joyce, and then if there isn't anybody else, then it'll be me.
Thank you, Chair. What do we know about uptake on the program that you referenced that's already doing this? Another agency that's already doing this. Do we know what
Yeah,
percent of
so,
the?
The specific example that MTS's board used, I'm not sure, but we did, as part of NCTD's, after the board direction in April, before the PAF committee meeting, when we talked about the low-income fare, we did look at Metrolink and LA Metro's low-income programs. They do have pretty substantial adoption, but one of the things that we learned from them is that it wasn't necessarily viewed by them as a ridership generator. So they did have a significant, I guess significant is up for anybody's interpretation, but they did have pretty good participation in their programs, but they weren't necessarily a ridership driver.
Okay, so we don't know like half of all eligible riders apply for and use the program. We don't really know what that looks like from a numbers perspective.
Yeah, Yoni did do an analysis before the PAF committee. I unfortunately don't have it in front of me, so we can send that to the board after this meeting.
Okay. I'll just share that I support us moving forward with a program that protects the lowest income earners in our area. I think ultimately, I know that the conversation about this is about protecting service. And the numbers don't seem, I know we have to do many things to protect service, but the numbers don't seem to have that justification in them as far as how much we're projected to take in from it. So, I think as part of a larger conversation, yes, it's about protecting and making sure our service is reliable and efficient. But I think if this was like, we're making a decision to save it or not save it right here, that's an easy call, but it's not that clear to me that that's what we're making the decision on. So I'm hoping to see us do a program. I hate to think that we're going to be doing different programs regionally again. I don't want to see us splitting off. I understand that we may not be fully on board, this kind of leaks into the conversation of we need to be in a better communication board to board with MTS since we share so much service. And that's a frustration to, like, we share the goal of protecting our low income riders, but we're not having, direct conversations about how we do that hand in hand. So that's a frustration, I think, from the just setup of our structure. And so I just would hate to see the worst. The last comment, which not to muddy the waters, I hate to see the worst of both worlds happen, where we take on the perception of raising rates on folks, and at the same time not have revenue to protect our services. I think that's not a good situation either. So I apologize for not having a clear and succinct message on this, but it's a challenging topic, and I appreciate everybody's weighing in.
Yeah, and I'll just add a clarifying point. So you're right. If MTS's board in April voted to recommend the approval of the fare change, and our boards were aligned, which was incredibly important, that we demonstrated to the Sandiag Transportation Committee that the two boards were supportive of this fare increase. It wasn't until they were having a budget conversation that contemplated the fare increase revenues that MTS's board sort of changed their tune and decided to advocate for this fare freeze program. I will note that if staff doesn't receive direction from the board today to participate in the program, we will not have time to participate by October 1st. So if the board takes a vote and says, no, we don't want to participate, or the board does not take any vote, we will not be participating in October, because we just won't have enough time to give MTS enough lead time to let them know that we would like to participate. However, we could be taking that time and receive clear direction from the board that they want us to explore our own program. But if we don't receive direction from the board today, we will not be participating, and our fares will increase for everybody on October 1st, should the Transportation Committee vote to support it tomorrow.
Can I
Board
clarify my
alternate.
speech?
Oh, go ahead, Board Member Joyce, and then I see Board Alternate Coleman wanting to chime in as well.
Sorry, before you go back to the live, I'll step out of the way, and then I will offer my clarified comments. I think we should join the program, given the list of options at this moment.
Go ahead, Board Alternate Coleman.
Hi, don't want to steal your time. So logistically, if we participate in the program and then this board decides later on, maybe between now and October, that they want to change paths, what do we just tell MTS that we no longer want to participate? Or is it once we tell MTS we want to participate, we have to follow through with it up to a certain date? And then, yeah, does the program kind of, does it update itself annually? Like, how does that go from there?
Yeah, so we, if the board votes to participate in the program, we're not locked in forever. The Transportation Committee vote tomorrow would allow us to do our own thing. And so per direction of the board, staff could bring back another item with information on what the lift would be for us to do our own income verification and some statistics around what the ridership and revenue impacts would be of that. And we can always come back to MTS and say, this is the program that we would like to do. Would you like to join us on this? Or would we be doing different programs? So I wouldn't say that we are locked in forever to this program.
If I could just add to that, only if the fare ordinance is approved by TC. I agree with everything that every board member has said. This comment that I'm going to make is just a generality about where NCTD has historically sat in terms of being managed by the rest of the region. Okay. I'll choose my words wiser. We have for years said that things that happen out of our control that impact us greatly, and our board has not a lot of say on some of these things that happen because we are not properly engaged by regional partners at times. I would say that's changed a lot with Sandag since Mario's been there. We've been involved in tons of stuff. This is a classic situation where, in fairness to MTS staff, they kind of got strong-armed by their board for an approval to a fare increase that had a direct impact on NCTD with zero conversation with NCTD. And now we're in a position where we either have to say, no, we're totally against low fare income, right? Like that's going to be the article in the paper, or we have to agree to this process sooner than later because logistically it will be difficult for us to try to manage around that while we're finding our peace. And the whole point of adding that language into the fare ordinance was so that collectively we as agencies could say, hey, we want to do this, they want to do that, whatever, let's try to figure it out. I would agree with the sentiment that regional fare policy should be regional fare. So we really want them to be try to be as close as possible together, but recognizing that in this case, we kind of got handed this one because MTS got strong-armed into an agreement for a fare increase. And I don't know if one got votes for the other. I'm not sure. I just know that that's what came out of that meeting, and that's what the discussion that came out of that meeting was a day before we walked into another meeting, or that morning, before we walked into another meeting to try to work on something that our staff collectively had been working on with MTS for months, right? Like, it was just a weird spot for us to be in. And I would say that I'm in favor of whatever direction this board chooses to go. My comment is more related to like, this is another example of how regionally, occasionally, we're sort of walked down a pathway because larger organizations have mandated a policy that has a direct impact on our desire to want to have a regional fare for all citizens of San Diego County. So I love the comments. I appreciate everything that was said. We could definitely go either way. I don't think it's a matter for us to just always like to put that other piece out there because I think there was a lot of good work behind the scenes, and I appreciated Director Joyce's comments on that too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And obviously, City of San Diego is a non-voting member on NCTD, unfortunately, in my humble opinion. But it seems like the board needs a little bit more time to discuss what route they're going to take. Just one more clarifying question. For the phase 1 and phase 2 numbers, are those conservative estimates or are those just like the singular estimates?
Yeah, so the original estimates for phase 1 and phase 2 without the Fair Freeze program was based off of a SANDAG model. Our estimates that we did in-house for how much less revenue we would receive is conservative.
Okay. Is it okay for me to ask my questions, everyone? My questions and comments. Okay. So first off, thank you to everyone. I feel like this has been a really good discussion, and I have a lot of other things that I wanted to also bring up, and I'll try to do them as succinctly as I can. But let me just start off with a comment, because I think when Board Member Martinez was asking her question, and then I asked that clarifying question around how folks do get qualified for CalFresh, CalWORKs, and Medi-Cal. I mean, I knew this because of my public health work, but it's really interesting now being in the policy world and realizing that, like, with the federal poverty level, if that's the designator and you live in California, California's standard of living is so much higher than the national average that if that's what's being utilized, we must be missing a huge chunk of people in all of those programs. So all of those people may not necessarily be qualifying. I know that's not something that we as an entity control, but I just wanted to underscore and highlight that from that particular perspective, I know we were talking about alternative ways that we could potentially look at it. However, if the state's not even capturing those people, I'm just going to go ahead and leave that there for what is clearly a discrepancy. So I guess, I'm curious if we've captured in terms of numbers, and it sounds like we may not necessarily have this number, and if not, that's okay, but this might be where, when I end with my last question, it might help us have all of these data points. But in terms of numbers, do we happen to know how many people would be impacted if we were to have something like this in a positive way? I would just be curious how many folks would be able to qualify based on the potential standards that we've talked about here. So
We do. So that was part of Yoni's analysis in determining how much revenue we can expect to receive less than our original estimations. So there's two pieces to this that I just want to highlight. We have a percentage of how much of our riders we expect to be able to be eligible under these programs. However, some of those riders are already captured under our SDM Pass, Senior Disabled Medicare. And so they already qualify for a discount program, which is greater of a discount than we would be offering with this, and so they likely would still remain under SDM. They wouldn't switch over to the fare freeze. It's approximately 60% of Breeze riders, 50% of Sprinter riders, and 20% of Coaster riders.
Okay, that's high. Thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad that I asked that question. I'm just soaking that in for a second because that was, yeah. Okay, in terms of the funding, because I know that's something that each person has touched on that in some particular sense, and I know we've been harping on operational funding being something that we all need a little bit more flexibility with from when we're receiving funds from different entities. In terms of, as we think about ways that this will impact our workforce in any way, because obviously somebody's going to have to do the intake, and I don't know if that's going to be absorbed by someone that's currently on staff, or if that's going to be something that we're going to discuss as somebody else being brought on to manage what this program would look like, because obviously it's not unless it's supposed to be a one-time deal, I'm assuming it would be a continuous, however somebody walks in and they say, hey, I qualify, we're checking, we're confirming, we're making sure we're onboarding, whatever that might look like. So I'm curious what that process and procedure would look like as well.
Yeah, so as Alicia kind of mentioned in one of the previous questions, there are kind of two paths to eligibility. MTS does their eligibility online, and so our riders are welcome to use that as well. They can go to the ridepronto.com, they can submit their documents through that. So they don't necessarily have to, but we do have some folks that like to talk to a person, furnish their documents in person and have that conversation at one of our transit centers. So Alicia's team does that currently for the SDM riders and the youth riders. Right now, we would absorb that with the existing resources. If we observe the lines at our transit centers getting exorbitantly long, then we would probably have to have a conversation with the board about maybe adding an FTE to the customer experience team. Because we can expect an initial rush when the program is first implemented, and then it would be anybody that becomes eligible for these programs can come to us. We are working with MTS on management of people's eligibility continuously. So if somebody no longer qualifies for one of these programs, right now we don't have a mechanism to know that, but because it's in its infancy, we can expect to be able to manage that a little bit better. Unfortunately, it'll be after the program starts, but we'll have to have a conversation with, sometimes the county manages the eligibility for these programs, sometimes it's the state, sometimes it's EDD, all of these different departments that we would have to integrate with so that they could let us know when somebody is no longer eligible for these programs. But right now, yes, we can expect a rush in the beginning, similar that we saw with Youth Opportunity Pass eligibility, the new Pronto system. We saw a lot of these things, a rush in the beginning, so it'll be a pinch for a little while. But right now, we're expecting to absorb it with existing resources.
I'll be mindful of how I say this, but I have to say, I don't know how much faith I personally have had issues with some of those, like when I had my child and I had to go through a process and had an injury and had to go through a process. I don't know how much folks are having to wait to bring in paperwork to show that they're eligible for something. So I just want to say that, and I know you all can't control that, but that's one thing that kind of gives me pause where I'm like, I really hope the people that really need it are getting the help that they need. So, okay. And then let's see here. I'm just going through really quickly here. Okay. Yeah. So, I think one of my questions is around, I know folks will be using different methods to qualify, and that's because of that line of thinking that I just shared. what's our system that, to ensure we can get back to folks quickly in terms of their eligibility? Because of course, it might take them forever to even get that eligibility form. So I'm just curious, like, how quickly we do our return back to
Right in
folks.
that moment.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank
they're
you.
instant. So
Thank
it
you.
would be, it falls, currently, we have reduced fare eligibility. We have instant qualifiers, like a VA letter, California Disability Placard card with paperwork. So once a customer comes in and presents, it's really under 5 minutes
Perfect.
that they're eligible.
Okay. And then I think, as we talk about, one of the things that I've been trying to figure out is, yes, like definitely, it's almost like the chicken and the egg, because we're talking about frequency, we're talking about how this would increase cost, and we're wanting to continue to provide more frequent transit. And, but then we are also talking about our operational costs and all those other things. And so, yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I wanted to, a couple different things. One piece was, I'm curious if there's any other, and it maybe speaks to what Ms. Contreras was saying, but I know the part that makes it difficult for me to just say, hey, let's do something a little bit differently, is because of how we would then work together as a region. And that's the hard part, where then you have folks confused on what they need to submit. And you want to make it as easy as possible and accessible as possible to folks in order for us to have the best outcomes. I mean, that's a public health thing. That's always what we do. And so I think one thing I'm just thinking about, and I don't know how this ties into our legislative platform, but maybe this is something for us to think about for each of our cities, but then also maybe at a NCTD level. This is just me thinking out loud, so please stop me if it doesn't make sense. But one of the things I had written down was the piece around that federal poverty level with the different CalFresh, CalWorks, and everything, and asking why it's been utilized for, just getting folks to qualify, because the missing middle is not just the missing middle for housing and everything else. It's clearly for all of these other things. And I'm thinking, okay, yeah, if this is the number of people that you just shared with us that are qualifying, 60% of Breeze, 50% of Sprinter, and 20% of Coaster, those are just the people that qualify at the federal poverty level. But we have so many other people that are likely impacted. And so that's why it's mind-boggling to me. So anyways, really interesting point. I think
that was a quick Google search, that it's based off of the federal poverty level. We will definitely verify what the eligibility is for each of those programs and send that out to the board.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I think the thing that when we talk about, like, when we're talking about how do folks apply for like low income housing, right? That's usually based on average median income for this particular region, San Diego County. And so that's why I'm curious what it is, because if that number is different when we're talking about CalWorks, CalFresh, and Medi-Cal, then we have completely different standards being utilized for something else, which doesn't make sense, So I'm so curious about that, and it would be so helpful to know that. And then that's where it's incumbent on us as legislators to advocate to make sure that there's an actual standard, so that everyone is aware of what that means when you're looking at, somebody that might be qualifying as low income. So anyways, thank you this was elucidating in many ways. The question I want to end with, and maybe it won't be a fan favorite, but I will ask anyways, is based on the feedback you've heard, and this might be a Mr. Donaghy question or a Ms. Dover question, what would you think is the best course of action from a policy, timeframe and flexibility, and then fiscal standpoint? Because it's all three of those combined. And I think you can hear that all of us want to support if there is a fiscal way to do so, but fiscally sound way to do so, but at the same time gives us the flexibility with the time frame that we have available. So I guess I know you're not recommending anything, but if you could give us some options based on those criteria, and then we can obviously decide. Look at that. I know they're like, okay, all right, who wants to take it?
So I'll provide my initial thoughts based off of a process standpoint, and then if you'd like to get philosophical
So,
afterward.
so I have to answer the hard question about the funding?
So, and I'll just note that the reason why we're bringing this to the board today is, one, because there's a vote tomorrow, and two, because we need to get back to MTS in a relatively quick manner. And so, we, as I mentioned, the fare increase, whether we do the fare freeze program or not, wasn't going to make or break us. It's an important source of revenue, but we still have to find other ways to plug the holes, which we are actively working on. These entities verify income already, and so that does take the burden off of Alicia's team and the MTS team to figure out how to do that. The reason why MTS's board wanted this to go into effect with the fare increase is because they didn't want the low-income riders to see any type of fare increase. So that's why that was the push for so quickly having it start with the fare increase on October 1st. I think we can manage it from a staff resources level. We won't see as much revenue anticipated, but regardless, the fare increase the revenue that we were gonna get from the fare increase wasn't gonna plug all our holes anyway, and so we can manage around it. We just have to try to get a little bit more. So from a process standpoint, I think it's important for the board to vote on something today. I will second Board Member Joyce's comments about the confusion of of separate programs, because we do have a lot of riders that connect from the Sprinter to MTS Rapid in Escondido. We do have a lot of riders that take the Breeze down to the UTC Transit Center and connect to the trolley. So it would be confusing, although they're a subset of our ridership, it would be confusing for those folks that have to have one fare class at NCTD and another fare class at MTS. That's the reason why we have a regional fare in the first place, because of those transfers. So I think although we were kind of strung along with MTS's process, I think that there are benefits to us joining this program from a rider experience perspective.
Is that a staff recommendation?
No.
Okay, Vice Chair Sanella, and then I don't know if Mr. Donaghy wants to round it out here, but
Oh, I have a comment.
Thanks again, Marion. Yeah, I certainly understand that the fare increases that were proposed and passed a few months ago aren't going to make or break us. And I think I already know the answer to this question, given that how quickly this is all kind of materialized, but we just passed our budget, right? And I'm assuming that the fare increases were baked into that new budget, or no?
They weren't actually,
well, that's good.
because we weren't sure what the Transportation Committee was going to do with it, and so we actually didn't anticipate.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
that's very helpful, because I was going to ask, the next question would have been, well, has staff had a chance to contemplate because it was a balanced budget, right? So if you have $600,000 less, something has to go, right? And we're not backfilling positions, we're already in a really tough spot as it is. But that was a huge relief, your answer there, so thank you. So we'll have to deal with it next year, but yeah.
Board Member Contreras.
I mean, it's just such a difficult decision, because we just don't have that much time, right? And so I'm wondering if we just need to go with what MTS is doing so that we can have congruency within the region, but potentially we can continue to look at a more surgical way to have a fare reduction for our most vulnerable, and maybe outline a process and try and sell that to the region as like a more thoughtful way of going about making sure that everybody in the region has ease in getting discounts that they're eligible for, but that we also maybe have a better financial situation as a region as well. So even though I don't feel super comfortable moving forward with what MTS is doing, because I do think that we need more time to take a look at it. is it possible that we could do what I'm saying is go with what MTS is doing and continue to get information about alternative fare reduction structure that, we can try to communicate to Sandag and to MTS. Is that possible?
Yeah, we,
So I really feel like y'all want a staff recommendation today. So I'm about to give you one, about to drop one on you. My recommendation would be that we follow MTS's path. I don't like it for the reasons that I stated. We have an agency in North County that is just as important as any other agency that exists in San Diego County. I don't care about your ridership numbers, I don't care about your budget. Our team has clearly shown that over the course of years, we are very proficient at making sure that we make budget and that we're not creating problems in public. Yet, when these decisions are being made at the regional level, until recently, when we've seen some leadership change at Sandag, we're always the last to know, and we always have to sort of follow the plan. I would say from a continuity perspective, I agree. I think that if the board is looking for direction today, my direction would be to follow the plan should everything pass at TC tomorrow, and then we can determine once that plan is made if we need to deviate from that. The only comment that I would make is, for years, one of the things that we get judged on, and I would just say CEOs in our industry is, hey man, what happened to farebox revenue? Where'd that go? And our answer has by and large been, we have made determinations to try to do right by ridership, and that has lowered farebox ratio, right? We have been very reluctant as an industry to raise fares, and rightfully so. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, we have viable explanations for why our farebox ratio went from 20% to 7%. And that has largely been to manage the public good. From an industry perspective, we're in a space where that's starting to brush up against service we're putting on the street, potentially frequency. I think we've talked about that. And we're going to continue to work to solve that problem. Is $613,000 going to make every 15-minute service go back to 30? No, it's definitely not going to do that. We'll be able to solve those problems in real time. I sort of liken it to the YOP. We were put in a very unique position where we were getting operating dollars for YOP, and now we're not. And essentially what we were advised was, hey, if you don't want capital money and you want to stop this program, that's great. And that put Sharon Cooney and I in a very tough position to tell the entire world, hey, sorry, your kids can't ride for free anymore. I mean, that's pretty much a job killer for me, right? Like, I can't have my face on the front page of the paper saying, Sean doesn't want kids to ride for free. And I support that program. Every once in a blue moon, we do these programs that make sense, and then we have to deviate from that plan, and that has a direct impact on our budget. That's $1.5 million or $1.1 million a year that was going directly to operating expense that now we have to put some bus shelters in, right? Like, not the same thing. My recommendation to the board would be, we go with the plan that's been presented by a few. I think Mary's recommendation is spot on. Mary's never, well, my recommendation is what Mary's not recommendation would be to move forward. We can deal with this when we need to deal with this.
Okay.
My cautionary tale on the YOP part is, I don't think we can work backwards from this, right? Like, once we do this, it would be insanely difficult for us to work backwards from this. So this is the baseline. Now, we can change it, we can make amendments to it, we can do the things we need to do. If the 613 is our only exposure, we can figure that part out. I'm very confident we can do that. One thing you will hear in the next presentation is that Mary and Tyler Mosher and a few other folks and you, Park Lynch, we went to Sandag, we discussed sort of a reevaluation of our SB 125 money, and we were able to redirect some SB 125 money that needs to one last final approval piece, and that will probably get us through fiscal year 2029. So now we're having a lot less conversations about emergency situations in 28 and 29 and really sort of focused on 30. And that gives us time to work on programs like
Okay.
this and other programs. So my recommendation would be to,
Okay, am I able to make a motion?
If I could just ask a clarifying question, because this was my question, so if you don't mind, I'd like to just ask another clarifying question, which was around, I hear your recommendation, and thank you, because I think all of us were asking for one, and so finally, we were able to get one. However, one question I had was, because we don't have a meeting next month, and we have a September meeting, and based on what has been shared, if we did decide, it's obviously going to be shared with TC tomorrow, and that then means, okay, we're kind of marching in that direction. However, as we get more information, I know you all are going to provide us with some of the things that we've asked and discussed. Could we decide, once you provide all of that, to go a different way, or will we not have that luxury at that point? I mean, and I'm not saying that we would step away from what we've committed to. It's just more of, once we've gotten some feedback and we decided, hey, we actually want to fine tune this in a different way so it works for NCTD, would we have that luxury, or would we not at that
we
point?
can absolutely do that, as long
Okay.
as, and that's the thing, right? Like, for continuity's sake, if we do what MTS is doing, it relieves us of a little bit of, well, not a little bit, a fair amount of work that we would have to do to separate the two fare pieces off of the regional fare policy. The regional fare policy is a policy, but when we add in our local policy and they have their local policy, we have to make changes in the init system for that, to sort of manage those fare things accordingly. If at any time, once this passes tomorrow, and I'm confident that it will, we have the ability, we could change it month to month if we wanted. And I'm not suggesting we do that. Just saying that we have the ability to do whatever we see fit at that point, because the purpose of the language that we put in there was so that we could sort of, our board could manage our fare policy the way we want to manage our fare policy, which is kind of not what's happening in this case. But for the interest of time, I think it's important that we don't have to agree to anything right now, other than, unless we change our mind, we're not going to change MTS's plan. I mean, I think if there's a motion on today, it's just to say, for continuity's sake, we're going to move forward with MTS's plan. And if we come back in September and and people are like, hey, this is a different game, something's different now, you can say, okay, we don't want to do that now, and then we'll start to work on the process of disconnecting the two.
And I think what would be helpful is I think we all asked a lot of different questions on numbers and whatever else. So if we could have that fuller picture in September to be able to make a really solid decision. I know it'll be like a couple weeks before they start to roll it out, because it's October 1st or something like that, right? So anyways, the reason why I say that is because we have some data. I think having all of that to be able to make a really sound decision on, of course, I get the fiscal impacts and everything else, but just being able to understand fully, like, how many people are we helping? How is this working? What is it? All of that would be so beneficial. And then figuring out, is there a potential alternative that would, I don't know. And none of us know that really, that could potentially do it better. I think this is obviously a more regional effect. And yes, I agree. I just want to echo the sentiments. It is challenging when this is at every level, when local entities are told to kind of do whatever everyone else is doing. I think from a local control perspective, that's frustrating, but I know that we're all local entities trying to do what we can. So I get that that's not, so hopefully we can continue. I know North County does what we can to continue to advocate for ourselves. Board Member Contreras and Board Member Edson, I think both wanted to say something. So I will let you all take the floor.
Okay, thank you so much.
Did you have a question or before the motion? Because I know she had a
did have
motion.
question before the
Okay,
motion,
go
if
ahead.
possible. So just in hearing all of this and the timing and is it the right thing? Are we going to come back and change it? Is there such a thing as a pilot freeze, or doing something, so committing to something temporarily to come back to the board at the first of the year or something like that, in addition to the September look, right? So that,
Are you saying like getting data back on how it's been going or something?
yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that to Sean's comments, if we start this, there's probably no going back.
Okay.
Because we've offered something and it's kind of difficult to take it back once we've offered this benefit. One thing I also will add is, we'll be able to provide the board with more information relatively quickly. You can expect to see that in the next couple weeks. However, we will not have figured out how to verify income eligibility by September. And if we brought another item to the board in September, that wouldn't be enough time for us to pull out of MTS's. Like, we will be baked by September. And so we could determine at a future date, we're gonna start the off-ramp process and we're gonna do our own, or MTS has decided that they now have the amount of time, we'll be able to have that conversation, maybe in September. But we will have the program, for all intents and purposes, up and running in September. And we will likely be accepting eligibility documents by then. So we'll be able to provide the board with as much information as we can, and we're going to continue to tease out what an income eligibility process would look like for our staff. But if the board votes today to participate in the program, we will be participating in the program in October.
So does, excuse me, if I may. So really, in September, what we would get is an update. But then could we have another, like I said, a actual real item on the agenda to consider if we've taken the right path, whether it's 3 months or 6 months or something like that? And what does staff consider to be the optimal length of time to be able to study it, to see? I mean, we've looked at expanding pilots for a couple of years and the length of them. But I don't know what I don't know from a statistics point of perspective.
We can do that. The logistical issue is how we collectively put our fare systems into init. That's what requires months. So if we make a change in September, it would take them, and I'm not sure what our new contract says, but it's at least 3 months of their obligation to go into the system and make changes relevant to our fare product. And it's a lot more about that and a lot less about the fare itself. There's a 3 to 4 month time frame for them to be able to, for them legally per our agreement, to go in and make that change and execute that change for our Pronto cards or for some of our customer service activity. So that's really the driver behind that, not necessarily the pilot piece.
So we have the phase 2 date as well, right? And so would it be something that we might re-examine this far enough ahead of the phase 2 change to see if it's something that's actually working or has a positive impact, negative impact, or what those might be?
We can. Lori reminded me that I'm notorious for saying things like pilots aren't really pilots.
I know.
And I've always been that way because, like, if you do a pilot and people like it, all of a sudden it's not a pilot anymore. Doesn't matter how much it costs, right? Like, and I think, we would be in a similar situation with this. I think logistically, the issue that Mary's bringing up is they have set themselves up for October based on the fact that they would have to have 3 months to make these changes in their system, which means we have 3 months to make whatever changes we tell them tomorrow in their system. And I think that's probably where the recommendation of we probably need to move forward with what they're doing just so that they can focus on their thing. We're dealing with ours. If we come back before phase 2 and decide that it's not working for us, I think it would be very difficult for us to back off that plan. I think we would catch a lot of heat for that. So I think realistically, we either have to say we're not with that program today, and then we would spend the next 3 months working on just telling them our stuff needs to stay the same. You need to pull ours out of what your changes are, or we're going to go the course with you and we can reevaluate at some other point what that looks like for us if we want to make changes to it. Not an easy decision either way.
Okay. Looking around to make sure, but Board Member Contreras.
Okay, I mean, I've gone back and forth. I feel like this is like
Yeah.
it's an interesting dance that we're doing. I'm wondering how you all would feel about this type of direction where we go for a 1-year low-income fare freeze utilizing CalFresh, Medi-Cal, CalWorks, subject to change upon verification. That maybe we have a 1 year where we're taking the paperwork in, we're in line with MTS so we can have regional continuity and congruency. And then that gives us a year to really look at if there's a different structure that makes sense, where maybe we do some of the work for MTS and we create a really compelling and thoughtful fare structure that makes sense for the financial viability of regional transportation. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at, hearing staff's recommendation and hearing all the board comments. So I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt a 1-year low-income fare freeze utilizing CalFresh, Medi-Cal, CalWorks, which is subject to change upon verification a year from now. And that staff returns to the board with more information about what a financially viable fare reduction looks like that is more targeted to our very vulnerable riders. Very long motion. I don't know, does everybody understand it? Are there
You could say income-based.
income-based?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just make a
Yes,
small amendment to
please.
that, if I could. Director
I'll
Gonzalez.
hear it and I'll see if I'll
Thank you.
allow it.
We really probably need to shrink that down less than a year because we're going to be looking at revenues related to the 28 budget, probably sometime in, at worst case, April. So we probably need to
Okay.
sort of revisit that with the board as a function of the 28 budget. So, and all I would say is instead of the year, I think we would just want to reevaluate before we approved next fiscal year's budget.
Okay.
So it's the 2028 budget
Just a
cycle.
point of clarification, that's, essentially, it's a pilot program, right? We're back to a pilot program, right? And that we're gonna, I mean, you can call it what you want to call it, but we're gonna try something and we may end up trying to unravel it.
You may or may not be out of order, Vice Chair.
Sorry.
Because it's my turn, but
It's all yours.
yeah. Okay, so, and that's fiscal year 28 budget?
Yeah, I would say we would need to reevaluate how that's
Okay.
impacted the agency for fiscal year 28.
All right, so how about this? Let me see if I can get my words out. So my motion is that we adopt the low-income fare freeze utilizing CalFresh, Medi-Cal, CalWorks to be in motion October 1st in line with MTS, and that the board reevaluate this decision come our discussion for fiscal year 2028
Budget.
budget.
I see Board Member Joyce seconding, potentially. Okay, he nods yes.
I was going to second, but I'll third.
Okay. So,
Question.
yes, we have a question by Board Member
So,
Martinez.
Did I understand you to say, however, that once we vote for it, we're kind of stuck with it? So therefore, how can we reevaluate it in 3 or 4 months?
We're never stuck with it. If we choose to make a change, we can do that. It's just going to take us 3 months to activate that with MTS because we have back office things we have to program. In my experience, once you make a leap like this, it's very difficult to
Publicly.
walk it backwards. Yeah. And if I could just offer too, a little bit of an offset to what we're kind of talking about, like, let's pretend we needed 4 additional FTEs to sort of manage our own program internally. That's probably close to 300 grand fully baked, maybe a little more.
Yeah.
So 6, 7? No, I mean, fully baked. When you put in retirement and you put in benefits, I mean, you're probably looking at 250, 300 in total. That's going to offset whatever that 613 is. So, I mean, there's wins and losses there across the board. I mean, if we do our own program, it's going to require us to set up our own program. It's going to require time for our IT group to do some of that stuff, our customer service team. So there are offsets to it. I don't want to act like there's not. But I do believe that once we make this move, the changes that we would make realistically in real time would be to either change the conditions of the program, but maybe not necessarily the program itself. I think that would be tough to do.
I think I see Vice Chair Sanella and then Mr. O'Hara, were you raising your hand? Okay.
Hi, thanks, everyone, and I'm probably going to support this motion, but I do want to just ask one question because it hasn't come up yet. And the reason why I'm asking the question is because while I am probably going to support this, I wasn't at MTS when they came up with their plan, but from what it sounds like, it sounds like it was hastily done, and it sounds like there's definitely opportunities to do it better. Clearly, I heard from everybody there's a level of uncomfort with this. And I just feel like making, two wrongs don't make a right. And if the first one's wrong and we're just gonna just piggyback onto that wrong, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. Is there any opportunity to try to engage with the MTS board and ask them to put the brakes on their proposal and then come back and work with us for something that's gonna be a grand compromise?
I think there is. However, I believe that this decision, was, I mean, we can ask whatever we want. We can go to their board meeting and engage them in conversations. This is to be fair, there's a lot of folks on their board that I think are super reasonable. I've had great conversations with them. I think they pay attention to the things that are sort of happening in real time. There are a few members of that board who support districts in the San Diego region that have some of the lowest poverty levels in the county. And so it's very difficult for them to sort of greenlight this need for a fair increase and counterbalance it with a not being able to manage. And I very much respect that. My understanding is, just from watching it from afar, not from having conversations with everybody, is just that one led to the other. The fair ordinance was likely not going to get approved by their board without sustaining the need for a low-income fair. And so I think the goal was we need something in the short term to get us to the tax initiative. And so that was sort of the give, right? Like, I think not related to us, the panacea for MTS is the tax initiative passes, because that's bigger than the fair increase, right? That's billions of dollars over the years that are going to help sustain it. We're in a little bit different of a situation where regionally the fair increase matters to us, but it's a little less of an impact than some other things that we can move around to make the operation work. Ian's going to get mad at me after the meeting when I said that, but that's the reality of it. We can move some other stuff around to sort of make that happen for the sake of argument. We can have a conversation with them. I don't think that it will change their position if I can be pretty blunt about that.
Well, I appreciate that, and because I don't have the context from MTS's perspective, but it hadn't come up in the entire 200+ hours that we've been talking about it. So I just figured before we go down a road that none of us are comfortable going down, we might as well ask the question.
And can I just, so taking the sentiment of your motion, so just typing.
Did you
something out.
rewrite it?
And Lori, please confirm that you're comfortable with, so, just to make sure that it's feasible for staff.
Yes,
and that it's something that
please.
can be worked. So a motion could potentially be participate in MTS's low-income fare freeze program beginning October 1st. Direct staff to bring additional information to the board to reevaluate participation in the program through the approval of the FY28 budget.
Amen. I love it. That's my motion. The seconder.
Seconder
still-
agree? That was Mr.
Okay,
Joyce?
Harry,
Okay,
call
I
the
see a
vote before we
thumbs
talk.
up. All right, let's call
And
for
the
the
thirder
vote.
says good.
All right.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Aye.
On the motion of Board Member Contreras, seconded by Board Member Joyce, to participate in MTS's low-income fare freeze program beginning October 1st, 2026. Direct staff to bring additional information to the board to reevaluate participation in the program through approval of the FY 2028 budget. Motion passes with Board Member O'Hara abstaining and Board Member Desmond absent.
All right. Thank you. I know we're almost 2 hours into the meeting. I'm going to look to my colleagues to see if we want to take a quick 5-minute bathroom break. So in 5 minutes, we will be back. So at 2:15. All right. So we are back in session at 2:16. Just before we start, I just want to say I know the other item went a little long, and there are many of us that I believe have to depart at 3:30. So to be mindful of that time and mindful of everyone else's time, when we have our questions and comments, if we could have them all organized, I know things will come up, but if we can go through them as expeditiously as we're able, feel free to jot it down, whatever will help in that process. So with that, we'll go to item number 2. And that is going to be an overview of services that NCTD provides, followed by a discussion of opportunities for NCTD to manage costs in the future. And this is the Ms. Dover show. So we will pass it off to her, and she'll be presenting this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be quick as well. So we wanted to bring this item to the board at the request of some board members and also just to prep for any future service and budget conversations that we might have in the future. As the board is aware, transit agencies nationwide are experiencing budget shortfalls in part due to declining sales tax revenues, inflation, rising costs in general, uncertain state and federal funding sources, among other factors that are unique to each transit agency. NCTD's FY27 budget is balanced. However, as the board will recall, we did project some deficits in the out years. As Sean mentioned in the last item, we do have a plan involving SB 125 funding to help cover that gap for the next few fiscal years. However, if that strategy doesn't materialize, if there is a significant change in state or federal funding sources or local funding sources, we wanted the board to be prepared for some of the conversations that we might have to have as a function of balancing the budget. So everyone on this board is familiar with NCTD's service, but as you're aware, we cover a 1,020 square mile service area in northern San Diego County. Our coaster service goes into downtown San Diego, and we serve a population of approximately a little under 1 million people. We have Breeze fixed route with Flex deviated route service, Sprinter service that mirrors the 78 corridor, coaster service that mirrors the 5, NCTD Plus in San Marcos and Vista, and then ADA paratransit lift service as well, providing a comprehensive transportation network. When NCTD is evaluating the effectiveness and efficiency of our services, we do have some service design guidelines. We've brought this to the board through some of the service changes that we've asked for the board's approval on in previous board meetings. These are not the only criteria that we look at. We have some routes that would not meet these service design guidelines. However, they serve an important piece of the transportation network. They serve a hospital, they serve a major educational institution, or they provide some other value as a public service. So NCTD does have some consistent top performing Breeze routes. The 303 is our most effective, followed by the 101. But we do have some other routes that you wouldn't typically think would be big ridership drivers. The 388 is very long. And it doesn't have the high frequencies that you would see on the 303 or the 101. However, it does have consistent heavy ridership loads. Conversely, we have some routes in Escondido, the 351, 352, that serve as more of a circulator. They're more urban, they're dense, they have very high frequencies, and those also have very high ridership loads as well. Some of the Breeze routes that we are continuing to monitor, the 315 and the 325, we recently did a reroute of those to try to better serve some of the communities. The 347, similarly, we had some schedule changes that we've made. The 304 and the 308 are one of those examples that I mentioned of routes that we do see as incredibly valuable in the larger transportation network, but don't necessarily have those very high ridership volumes. The reason why we're bringing this to you today is to talk about our funding gap in the out years. This is pulled from the FY27 budget that the board approved last month. We, as Sean mentioned, have a plan to cover the gap in the next few fiscal years, but we wanted to have this conversation with the board in case something changes and we have to make some service decisions in order to balance the budget. Now I'm going to talk about some of the things that we could potentially be asking the board to do This slide, we really just wanted to contextualize what the funding gap is. So in FY '28, right now, we have a projected $7.7 million funding gap. That equates to, in order to close that, one thing that we might look at is reducing all weekend service on all modes to hourly frequencies and eliminating NCTD Plus on the weekends. That would come up with roughly $7.7 million. In FY '29, we have a projected $23 million deficit. In order to close that, we would have to eliminate all Breeze, Flex, and NCTD Plus service on the weekends, discontinue Sunday Sprinter and Coaster service. In, I believe, FY '31, we have a $33.6 million deficit. In order to close that, we would have to reduce all weekday service to hourly frequencies and eliminate NCTD Plus in its entirety in order to close that gap. Yes. Some potential service options that we might look at if we're unable to close the funding gap in the interim. Those are obviously, from the previous slide, very drastic changes, but that's just kind of giving the board and the public a picture of what this dollar value really means for the service. One thing that we could look at if we are really in a bind and we're unable to close the funding gap through other strategies would be the elimination of NCTD Plus, Vista, and San Marcos, the re-implementation of Breeze 334 in Vista and Breeze 347 weekend service in San Marcos. That would equate to about $1.7 million. If we eliminated Flex 473, which is a coaster connection route out of Sereno Valley Coaster Station, that equates to around $700,000. If we reduce hourly or more frequency, reduce to hourly or more frequency on Breeze 304, 325, or 353, that would equate to about $1.6 million. Or if we reduce late night Friday and Saturday service to hourly frequency on Sprinter, currently 30 minutes, that could save us approximately $1 million, $970,000. One of the things that we are looking at in the interim, we're always looking at how to improve the productivity and the efficiency of our services so that we can try to stave off some of these really drastic service changes. We're looking at some things that are cost neutral right now. We could potentially reroute Breeze 325 and 353 in Escondido to improve productivity and access of the routes. One thing that we're consistently looking at is travel patterns and making sure that the routes that we are currently serving still match shopping centers and other things that might pop up. The makeup of our cities is continually changing, and we want to make sure that the service that we're providing is still consistently connecting to the places that people are traveling to. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Yes, thank you. I was in the middle of writing a question, so thank you for the presentation. Do we have any public comments to speak on this item?
Sorry, I'm just double checking. No, we do not.
All right, thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on this item will end. Are there any board member questions or comments? I know I have some, but I will wait till the end. And I see board member O'Hara. I'll start on this end and I'll go down. Go ahead.
I just had a question of clarity to start with, basically. 325, a road 325, isn't that a route that we recently looked at, or was that a different route?
Yes, the board was asked to eliminate the 325 and on the weekends. When we made that change, we also did a reroute of the 315 on the weekend to serve a portion where we had a few riders. So right now the 325 is only operating on the weekdays. So we could go further, and that's one thing that the planning team is looking at right now, is if we do a further reroute of the 325 to try to be a little bit more efficient.
So is it getting ridership, or is that not, has the change not resulted in anything? And
we see about the same ridership that we've seen on that route. I think the deviation for the Saturday piece on the 325 was specific to one portion of a neighborhood where we had some riders that used it. And so when we really weren't necessarily looking to change a lot of the fixed route, that one never really got moved. I think to your point, and it's a good one, and it's one of the things that our planning team's been looking at, is we have several corridors that sort of converge and at points of time have 2 to 3 routes that travel along one corridor at like 10-minute, 15-minute intervals across with 3 different routes. I think what we're really trying to look at is how do we service areas with a smaller footprint, and then just have like one frequent service along the corridor that takes people between transit centers. And that will help us sort of reduce costs. The visual piece of that, which people get hung up on, is that's another transfer I have to make, right? Like, so instead of having a one-seat ride, now I have to catch the circulator to a frequent stop and then ride that to Vista TEC or ride that through and then jump on another bus. And I get that, but if we can make your ride, you know, a half hour instead of 45 minutes on 2 buses instead of 1, that's kind of the goal. I think we do have these sort of pockets of places where historically there was 1 or 2 people that always rode the bus there, and we were reluctant to sort of manage that effectively. But the 315 fix has been pretty good because we still see same core ridership on a 325, and we're still sort of collecting those folks on the 315 on the weekends without having an impact on the 315. So I think that change has been maybe not a positive in the sense that we're gaining a lot of ridership, but positive in the sense that we were able to reduce cost and still manage the same customers.
Right, and that was that change we made around where we basically changed the square routing of around Carlsbad Village, if I remember it, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it seems like we come back to that route, and we're at some point we're looking at a square peg in a round circle, a round hole, whatever. I did have a question on the 23 million number. If we discontinued on Sundays, this is only because we talk about this frequently. Does that include trips to the Padres games, trips to the track, trips to Comic-Con?
Yeah,
I would say we would likely try to find a way to manage. An agency I worked at years ago, we did not run Sunday service on commuter rail. There just wasn't a lot of traffic between Dallas and Fort Worth on Sunday. But if the Mavericks were playing or if there was a Cowboys game or something like that, we ran ad hoc service. But that service was paid for and managed a little differently. And so I think if we were going to go down that road and run 699s for Padres on the weekend, on Sunday, if we didn't run it, we would want to try to find a way to get that funded through another source.
Got it, yeah, because I mean, to me, those seem like as much marketing as they are moving, right? Moving people from place to place and transport. So I was just curious about that. That was included. Those were really just, again, questions of clarity. I appreciate the answers. Thanks.
Yeah, I would say the dilemma for us, especially on Coaster, is that our weekend ridership is starting to outweigh our weekday ridership in some cases. You know, historically, we had a lot of ridership that was Monday through Friday for a lot of our government workers in a few other areas. I think one of the things that we struggle with is we essentially doubled, or in some cases even a little more, 2.5x our weekend service on Coaster, and we're seeing the yield from that. Like if we were really going to go back and evaluate where the gap would be, it might be a Monday or a Wednesday, and it just looks weird when we're having that conversation. I would say on the hourly weekend service piece, there are a lot of agencies that do that. I mean, they stabilize at a 1-hour bus frequency on the weekends. We don't, because the county, like our service area is so big, we almost need that half-hour service for connectivity on some of our rail lines and other things. But yeah, the Coaster piece is interesting for us, given our past couple of years, our rise in weekend service.
Super. I appreciate the explanation. Thanks.
All right. Board Member Contreras, I think you had your hand up, and does anyone else have their hand up? Because I haven't seen one yet.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you mind, Vice Chair Sanella, if I go to Board Member Joyce and then I'll come to you, Vice Chair Sanella? Okay. Go ahead, Board Member Contreras, and then I'll go to Board Member Joyce and then Vice Chair Sanella.
Yeah, you know, I really appreciate getting this information and just starting to look at potential options. I think that's really important. I don't have too many questions. I really just have a comment in looking at, and I wish our representative from the county was here to hear this, but the 388, I just want to call out, I didn't realize that this was one of our higher ridership routes, but I have been on this route, and I do think that we have a huge disservice for such a large population that's utilizing this, where our bus stops are wholly incomplete. And on the county side, it is totally not fair that we have, these things are they're in the sun, there's no benches, there's no bus shelters, there's no lights. So I just want to call out the fact that there needs to be a little bit more capital improvements for our bus stops for the 388. And you know what? It's something that I would love to advocate to the county, that they help out NCTD, bring dignity to the 388 and its ridership. So I just need to call that out. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I appreciate that comment. One of the things I can tell you is specific to sort of the Paula area and Fallbrook is one of the reasons we haven't invested a ton of energy into that. And we have actually put some shelters into Fallbrook. We have a really good relationship with a few people out there that ride frequently. That was sort of on the list as a potential look for microtransit. 388 is interesting because they're, even when you sort of break out of Escondido, there are some spots where it's very difficult for us to put in shelters, even something as like a mini bench where it's got like a stop with the two little seats on the side. There are a few spots going out Escondido, out toward Paula that create some problems for us. And I think, I don't want to put all that on the county. I think some of that's on us to sort of go back and reevaluate some of these best locations. In fact, we're having conversations with the casino right now about maybe trying to get into the casino instead of being on the street so that people don't have to walk out and stand in the sun. So there are some options for us, I think, to fix that. Fallbrook has always been like going up the hill. For some reason, every time we put in a bench, 5 minutes later, somebody's crashing through it. That's been a weird spot for us, right by that airport entryway where you take the left to go up the hill to the airport. Every time we fix that bench there, 5 days later, somebody's
Fallbrook's
crashing
missing a lot of important infrastructure
Yeah.
for safe, just all modes of transportation, whether you're biking, walking, or taking public transit or driving a car. Yeah, but I just want to call that out because I do want to see us move forward, and I think there should be cost sharing. I know in my city, we spent some good money to put some amazing bus shelters on North Santa Fe, and I'm going to continue to advocate for, that's the 303 bus, which is the highest performing bus. So, but just seeing, I was not expecting to see the 388 on here, and the fact that it's there, I think that we really should focus in on where it makes sense for us to improve the right of way and do that with the county. And
Yeah,
have them give us some money for it too.
It's a good route. I've been on that route. It's
Yeah,
very-
it's nice.
a very consistent customer base, and they usually are going out pretty happy and coming back pretty quiet. But it's a good group out there. We like it.
Thanks.
Board Member Joyce?
Thank you. Could you explain the math on slide 18, the 1.7 million in savings? Can you just explain what the cost of eliminating and then the cost to operate are specifically?
Yeah, so, and just for some additional context, when we implemented the NCTD Plus Vista program, we saw the Breeze 334 service to be duplicative, and so the board voted to eliminate that route. So this is kind of if we were to eliminate NCTD Plus Vista and San Marcos, that would save us approximately $2.5 million. I'm looking at our CFO. However, what we would do in order to maintain a continuity of service is we would reinstate the Breeze 3334. Similarly, the board voted to eliminate weekend service on the Breeze 347 because NCTD Plus, again, we viewed as a duplicative service. So similarly, we would add that back in, and so that gets us to the $1.7 million number.
Okay, thank you. Just so I'll just stay with NCD Plus first. I think we have to have a local contribution plan if we're going to continue to be part of that service. And just because for a few reasons. One, it's a different type of service. It serves different individuals, and if we really want to see it as part of our long-term system, then we have to be able to see it into all of our really denser, spaces that we're working. And so if we're going to make that part of our system, NCDD Plus is going to be part of our system, then we need to find a way to make it, extendable to our other areas. And I think the only way that we can do that, given our situation, is to require local matching. So I think local matching is necessary, and I think it also brings forward the reality of continuing this service as part of our overall map. So I would just plant that flag with NCD Plus. Again, it's exciting service, and it is very different than. I think it also is a little bit of a shift in the mission of what we do. So I would just advocate that we take that very seriously on. It's not mass transit. It's not the same thing. And if we're going to do that, then we should do it responsibly and get local matches to be part of it. So I think I'll just leave it there in the interest of time.
Thank you. Thank you,
only
Mr.
thing-
Joyce. And Ms. Dover has something, and then Vice Chair Sinella.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add is that we actually have started engaging the city of San Marcos in particular as our longest standing NCTD Plus pilot about what a local contribution would look like. We're starting the process of drafting an MOU, and we've started negotiations with the city about what the city is able to provide for NCTD Plus. It's not much, but we'll take anything, I think, to be able to sustain the service. So we've started that process.
I'm out of turn, but are school districts involved in that, or just the city?
So that's a great question. I have been very reluctant to cross that bridge. Almost every other place I've worked, we have received a significant contribution from the school districts to provide service to the schools. And I can tell you that what's not really listed up here is we deviate a lot of 600 routes. We don't deviate. We provide service that drives by schools per the FDA regulation that is not necessarily part of that normal route outside of the deviation of schools. And that costs a few $1 million a year for us to do that, maybe a little less. I think it's right around the same cost as NCTD Plus last time we looked at it. So we get a lot of requests from the school district. In fact, we have really good relationships with all of the leadership teams at the schools, but that's a bridge we have not crossed yet. I mean, as we continue to see this breakaway from yellow bus service, we don't mind stepping up and doing that, but for us to sort of manage new schools that are being built, or in some cases, schools that are being closed and relocated to another school, we have to completely redo the service grid. We do a lot of our service built around bell schedule. That's not necessarily the most optimal time for us to run some of those vehicles. So we have this like school schedule that's sort of baked in between the other normal 30-minute schedule, and it throws things off occasionally sometimes. But that conversation is something that we are going to have at some point, which is we're going to need a little bit of a contribution from the school district to continue forward with that. And we haven't crossed that bridge yet. I've been super reluctant to throw that out publicly because I know that's a super touchy subject, but I appreciate the question.
Appreciate it.
I think Board Member Joyce had one other comment, and then I'll come back to Vice Chair Sinella. Oh my gosh, sorry.
Thanks. I just because of the clarification that was given, my call out to my board here, to our board that serves the whole community, is that if we're doing one-off negotiations, which I'm glad that those conversations are definitely happening, I really think we should have a policy that says this is the contribution that we expect from municipalities that are benefiting from this very specific service. That I'm not 100% sure and haven't seen the real data that shows it increases our broad ridership across the board. I know that there are access improvements for sure, but I think from what was initiated with the programs to now, I just think it's a real conversation that we need to have about the responsibility for continuing the service, which I think is vital in a lot of our spaces where the first and last mile are the challenge, but also only serving specific communities. So again, I'd ask the board to take up a policy on this so that we can have a direction moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Joyce. Vice Chair Sinella?
Yes, thanks, Mary, for the presentation. Can we go to the slide that was kind of looking out 2, 3, 4 years with the big, the drastic changes? Oh, the one that you were just there. Yep, thank you. I know that these are just kind of hypothetical in nature and to kind of give examples of what may be cut, but as board members, should we be asking staff, like, is there anything that we can start cutting today or start taking some steps towards today so that when we get to these fiscal cliffs, they're not so painful?
Yeah, so we have, that's gonna be all day. So we have started the process at Sean's direction. When he came in, we looked at a comprehensive look at all of our, in particular, breeze routes. And so we have as comprehensive as a way as we could, brought forth some recommendations to the board that the board has voted on to do schedule changes, frequency changes, on occasion route eliminations, because we have looked at some of that low-hanging fruit, the services that we deemed were really not productive or maybe had too high of frequencies that weren't necessary. So we have started that process and we are continuing. The planning department does continue to look at where we could be optimizing our services, even if it's not a cut or a change in schedule, looking at could we serve this community better and could that drive ridership and revenues? So we are doing that in the interim.
Yeah, I think the difficult part of that conversation, and I appreciate Director Joyce's comments. The example on NCTD Plus I'll give is my predecessor was adamant that that was premium service. So it was $5 a ride all day long. There was never going to be a success point at $5 a ride. So we made the collective decision under the pilot, which we had the autonomy to do without necessarily bringing it to the board, was just to drop it down to our regular fare structure. You know, so it was three and $1. I mean, something similar. I mean, we had the autonomy to sort of drop it back a little bit. $1.50 if you're going to the transit center, you know, $3 a ride. I ride it all the time. I pay my $3. It's amazing. It largely depends on how we view the statistics, right? Like we could put all of our fixed routes up on the board. And in fact, I remember talking about this in my interview years ago, was like, if you look at the 347, for example, it is historically one of our not very good producing routes. But it serves the community college, a high school, and Cal State, right? So like, there's a value in that. And there are routes in Oceanside that are the same way, that sort of serve these pockets that would not have access to transportation. And it would be easy for us to cut that off and save 250 grand. But that would be counterproductive to like the mission of trying to provide transportation. There are glaring spaces within our grid where we have overlap. And the overlap is what we need to solve long-term. Like we need to sort of figure out why we have these redundancies and try to remove them from the system so that we're providing maybe more frequent access in pockets where we've removed a route that wasn't productive, right? It's a combination of all of those things. Like we can look at them as a number from a dollar perspective, but there are legitimate reasons why some routes don't perform as well as others. Because of the way that either the geography is set up or where those individuals are going in that service. And so we try to combine all those things when we make those determinations. And I think the team's done a really good job of that. The piece for me that we're sort of at now, which planning is working on, is when I go to a bus stop and I see 3 blades for 3 different routes on a bus stop, that is significantly unproductive. And we need to find out why we got to that space. And that's not a reflection of our planning team. They weren't here when that happened. They're helping us build out of that. It could be a situation where somebody's got to take 2 buses instead of 1, but we're providing that same frequent service across the network. Probably the biggest piece of that is like mid-coastal cities trying to get to Vista, inland, right? Like not up and over, they're going straight through. So there's places along those lines where we have 3 different routes at some period of time along those roads. And those are the things we're trying to address that can help us solve like $1.5 million here, you know, 2-3 million there. And we're getting to that. I think one of the things that every transit agency ever has been plagued with is like, if you put a map up of 25 years ago, transit system is probably very similar to what it was 25 years ago. People have moved, there's been sprawl, there's been economic changes, right? Like things have just changed along the line. And outside of the rail, which can't move, the bus sort of has to move with that. And I'll tell you, like Yoni Shlakova, who's our director of planning, she is phenomenal. Like she's thinking Like, we're on level 2, she's on level 25. Like, she's already working on stuff that we haven't even thought about. And it's just going to take us some time to kind of put that together, kind of pull the soup together and kind of take a look at what that looks like. But I think that's a great question, because when we talk about things like NCTD Plus, one of the things that we kind of look at is we eliminated 343. How many other new riders have we brought to the system that now have access to the network because geographically we couldn't put a 343 in certain neighborhoods or in certain hills? And I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily, I think to Director Joyce's point, I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily worth the additional 1.5 million, but that's what we need to evaluate. Is it worth something, and what is that number? What's that number worth, right? So a little bit of a long-winded way to get there, but
I really appreciate that, and I hope that, from all my actions on this board and my comments, that staff knows that I have full faith and confidence in you, and will usually 100% defer to your recommendations. And I just know that, these are some big fiscal cliffs that we're facing. We know that we're going down this road, and that cliff's coming, and so are there things that we can start to anticipate and do now it's like the conversation we had with our rate increases. If you don't increase rates for 20 years, when you finally do, it's going to be a huge impact, right? And so this is kind of the same thing. And I will just say that I do agree with Director Joyce's comments that if we are going to have something, and I'm a huge proponent of NCTD Plus and will advocate it both from my position on the city and here, but if we are going to have NCTD Plus, probably should be system-wide, or all of our cities should be able to benefit from it. It does kind of seem, I understand we were rolling it out on a pilot program, but it does make some fairness sense that we would do it everywhere if we're going to do it. So
I would just add to that there has been a big shift in microtransit in our industry. 15 years ago, it was all the rage, and I wasn't totally sold on it just yet. I think there are definitely situations where it works. There are, from a holistic perspective, it doesn't necessarily work for everybody everywhere. And I think what you're finding is there are a fair amount of systems who did these pilot projects in 20 small cities, and it just didn't yield the ridership that they were investing into the operating expense. So all points well taken, and I agree with all of them. There are benefits to some in some areas, and then there are others where it's like, okay, is that really being effective? Do we need to morph the grid? Is it costing us too much on OE? So I think everybody's points are extremely valid, and we need to keep a close eye on NCTD Plus.
Ms. Contreras, if I may ask my questions, only because I think we're getting close to time to try to shift over to the last item, but I will get back to you before we transition to the next one. I'll try to go through this as fast as I can because I had quite a few, but I know we took some time, and I want to try to get to our last item and have a good discussion there as well. But if I could, the hard part for me, and I'm just going to say it, and it's not a reflection on anyone, it's just more of, whenever we talk about reducing routes, that's really hard for me. Our job, obviously, I know you all know this, is like, I'm just putting it out there as like, what can we continue to do as a board to advocate? It's hard for me to say that we need to optimize our routes and like reduce our services and really try to figure, I always am trying to figure out, okay, what more can we do to make sure that we're actually advocating for this funding? Because what we continue to hear in one of the questions, and I won't keep harping on that because we are limited on time, but I'm curious is, and maybe you shared this and I apologize if I missed it, but what percentage of this is operational or maintenance when we're looking at these funding gaps? If you know that, and if not, that's okay. I'm just curious, like in terms of projections, like what percentage is looking like it's more operations versus maintenance?
It's a combination. I mean, when we talk about operating expense, it's essentially what's not necessarily in here, or probably is in here a little bit, but not clearly spelled out, is state of good repair. If you look at the budget for years out, what you'll see is historically we forecasted a 5-year state of good repair capital budget. And if you look at the one we approved this year, right around after fiscal year 28, there is no money designated for capital repair. That's probably the biggest danger. This money here is more related to the operating expenses related to personnel to operate the service and maintenance required
And that was
to
the
cover it.
question. Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that because it sounds like that continues to be our biggest issue. And based on what we just shared, if it is that, the question I have is, and I know we've been talking about this over the course of the last few months, is how do we get more of that funding? And how can we look at ways to diversify our revenue stream, if anything? Because I don't want to keep getting to I don't like having this conversation, and us continuing to have this conversation means that we aren't getting to the point of why we started as an agency, right, is to be able to provide that reliable transit. And so my question would be back to you all, and if we don't have that today, that's fine, but as we continue to have this dialogue, one of the things I'd be curious to know is if there's a way for us to really think about how do you utilize us. So that was another question, was what can we as a board do with regards to our operational funding? Does that mean we need to go advocate? I know you all go there, but sometimes us going there and maybe us activating our bases of support of, hey, let's get people voting on this and making sure they're actually changing things. So what does that look like in terms of advocacy and getting us in front of people that are going to make those decisions?
Yeah, I think that's always been our long-term plan, is to do that. Where things are a little bit, things get a little bit complicated in our current setting is we have a new governor that's going to come into the state. It's not necessarily, I think it would be difficult for us to go to Sacramento just from a state perspective and try to lay down some thoughts and objectives in the absence of sort of knowing what the guidepost is going to be in a couple months, once we have a better view of what that looks like. And we've had some complications in DC with that, not necessarily related to our formula funding, but there's some significant changes that have been suggested through the Office of Budget Management, through FTA and FRA specifically. In fact, one of the budgets that came out essentially gutted $130 billion worth of rail funding to essentially negative. Essentially, they would pull from other buckets of money to fund Amtrak's one-half portion of their public side of the budget. And then everything else would sort of stay status quo on the bus side, which is fine for the bus folks, where we've got both. So that complicates things greatly for us. I think we would like to see, I think there's a lot of interest to see what is happening in November, both at the national level and at the state level, to decide sort of what that framework looks like. And we go to DC 3-4 times a year for various different agendas, but March is typically when we go for our big meet and greet with folks. And we do want anybody that, feels like they want to come on that trip and help us advocate, please do. I think there's definitely a power in that. We go to Sacramento a fair amount, a few times a year. We can run up there for day trips on a pretty reasonable price. So I think where I get hung up at the state level sometimes is at the last minute, which was sort of course corrected in this one, is carbon funding, right? Like they cap and invest, and then there was a initiative put out to sort of eliminate us from cap and invest. And those are things that, like, at the last hour, they totally changed the way that we're doing business. I know I've said it before, I'll mention it again. I really struggle that the state is putting $1 billion a year into a project that I don't think will yield anywhere near the results they hope it will. It's way far beyond its intended and original purpose, and we're in a place where we're just writing checks that could be distributed across the state to solve transit problems. Local tax initiatives are a difficult conversation for us because we know that our fellow Californians are already getting taxed a bunch. So we're trying to be very thoughtful about what that looks like from our perspective. How do we sort of manage different ways of looking at that? But I think we really won't know what that looks like until we sort of see what the governor's race looks like and what we see from November in DC and their willingness to want to try to put a new bill forward in DC on reauthorization. So, Mary, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or.
Well said.
Okay, just a couple more points. Then I'll go to Ms. Contreras, but I would love for us to transition to item 3 in the next 5 minutes. Okay.
Reclaim my time.
And if we could keep our responses, yeah, perfect. So one thing that I wanted to ask is when we change a route or consolidate, what does that look like from of course, I know from a client perspective, like for somebody that's utilizing it, but curious what that looks like from a workforce perspective. Like, how does that shift what folks are doing, or otherwise? So
Very short answer. We do, whenever we have a service change that results in like a reduction of the total hours of Breeze service that we have, we usually just shift staff from scheduled routes to what we call extra board, where they are there to fill in for vacations and things like that. So it's never a reduction in workforce. However, if we get to a point where we need to make changes of this magnitude, then it would likely result in a reduction of workforce.
yeah, and that's one of the comments I had was, of course, reducing routes means impact on FTE, which then means impact on workforce in general. So that's helpful. Okay, I have other things, but I feel like this is a larger conversation in general. I appreciate you all bringing this forward, and I think you've heard from all of us some of the apprehensions and some of the things that we'd like to discuss maybe at a future date. I don't know what that would look like. I don't want us to get to a point where we're having to have this discussion once we're eliminating a route. I do think having a larger discussion on how you utilize all of us. I believe me, if you told me, hey, we would need you in the next month to go out, I think many of us would be open to doing that if our schedule allowed. So please, I know I say this a lot, but please actually use us, because I think it's necessary in this particular sense. The operations money, I mean, I've been talking about it everywhere I go as much as I can. But if that means that you can provide us with something that we can then mention to our constituency, we have a lot of people that might be willing to also write to their representatives that are voting on these different things. So that, use us as much as you can. That's what the grassroots support is for, and that's what representatives are for. So whatever we can do to help, I mean, voters do make a difference, right? I mean, we're seeing it across the country. So whatever we can do to activate folks to really engage on something like this is going to be critical. So please let us know what we can do. We're here to help. And with that, we can transition to item 3.
Madam Chair, if I may,
yes.
just for the record, just wanted to note that Board Member Garcia departed at 2:14,
Yes.
and Board Member O'Hara is departing at 2:58.
Yes.
Thank you.
Board Member Joyce, did you have something on this particular item?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Are we able to bring back a conversation about an NCTD plus cost sharing possibility?
Oh,
Is
yes,
that
I
something
think they
staff can bring back?
they already took note of that, but I appreciate you mentioning that. And I had a comment on that, but I can talk about it when we get to that conversation when it comes back. So, okay. Mr. Donaghy said it's always been part of our plan, if you didn't hear him. So, all right. So item 3 is our last item, which will be an overview of the board governance and board committee structure. We will have a board discussion regarding the governance structure of the agency, providing an overview of NCTD's enabling legislation that's codified in the Public Utilities Code and policies of the board. So Ms. Dover will present this item, and I think Mr. Mosher is joining you as well. So I will go ahead and pass it off to you all.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do have with me Tyler Mosher. He's our Government Affairs Officer, so we'll try our best to answer any questions that you may have. So we wanted to bring this conversation to the board because we've had some requests from board members about what is at liberty for the board to change that's in board policies and what would require an act of the legislature in terms of the board's authority, governance, committee structure, things of that nature. So I'll just start with some high-level aspects of our enabling legislation. In Public Utilities Code 125050, it does list the constitution of the Board of Directors. So it lists the cities that are in the district, and it does also contemplate who the member of the San Diego County Board of Supervisors is. It's the district that has the largest population within the district. It does also mention that the city of San Diego is a non-voting member. So if we decided to change that, we would have to, it would be an act of the legislature. Public Utilities Code also has our area of jurisdiction. It also does talk about when the board elects the chair and vice chair. In the enabling legislation, it does say that that has to happen in January. It does, though, delegate the authority to the board to appoint advisory commissions or committees as it deems necessary. So in the course of the board's governance, the board has full jurisdiction to determine what committees it wants to have of the board. Board policy number 1, which is well within the board's purview, stipulates NCTD's mission and vision. So if there comes a time when NCTD's board would like to change the mission and vision, that is well within its purview. The board policy 1 also outlines the policies for the adoption of board policies. So board member Joyce's comment about a board policy about NCTD plus cost sharing, that is well within the board's purview to adopt. Board policy 3 is the policy that stipulates the committee and external appointment structure. So board policy 3, as it's written right now, establishes the executive, performance administration and finance, and marketing, service planning, and business development committees. It provides the composition of the executive committee. It states that the executive committee is made up of the chair, vice chair of PAF, and chair of NYSBTA. It also sets the committee responsibilities and allows for the establishment of ad hoc committees. We had a rail safety and community enhancements ad hoc committee that was established by the board a couple years ago. So high level overview. If the board would like to change the composition of who sits on the board or who is voting and non-voting, if the board would like to change when the chair and vice chair are elected, or the compensation of the board, those are acts of the legislature. If the board would like to change the mission and vision, the structure and the purview of the committees, or any other policies related to projects, redevelopments, anything like that, that is well within the purview of the board. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Great, thank you. Do we have any public comments to speak on this item?
We do not.
All right, at this time, public registration to speak on this item will end, and we can start with some questions and comments. I'm trying to make sure I don't miss Board Member Joyce. Anybody have, I mean, I know I have some, but, oh yeah, I do, but I can wait. I see Board Member Joyce potentially moving to raise hand. Are you? Yes? Okay, go ahead, Board Member Joyce.
Yeah, so I don't know, I feel kind of funny having this conversation with our board not complete, but I would like to see our committees. I have felt like the committees have been more of an afterthought, and that was one of the reasons I brought this forward a few different times. And I have frequently watched the executive committee basically have the same exact conversations as our full board has, and they have it earlier. And so I think it kind of, in some ways, undermines our ability to act as a board and do it well. So I do think there are some changes that need to be put together to make sure that the committees are active and doing what they're doing. I know we changed the time to our the committee that I'm a part of to happen right before the board. And so the committees that I've been a part of have never felt like a very advisory committee where we can get down to the details. And that's kind of when I think of a committee, what their job is to do, to like really get into the nitty gritty a little bit further than you do in the general board. So I'm just throwing that out there. I think it's going to take some like workshopping, and I don't know that we have like alternative structures here in front of us, but I'd like us to take up some of that work to try and set up a vision of what an active committee structure would look like that could support the board in really enacting strong policies.
So we do, every October, the board reviews all of the board policies and has the opportunity to change them. In order to help with the ease of scheduling the committee meetings, we did try to put them on board meeting days. However, we've noticed that it becomes kind of duplicative, that the committee is having the same conversation as the board. So we're likely to change that in October. We will have a set time so that the board at least is aware of when the committee is meeting, but we're probably not going to advocate for them to be on board days anymore. It just becomes a lot for the board members and for staff, so we'll likely move that. We wanted this to be a staff-facilitated conversation, but a board-directed conversation, because they are committees of the board. And so we wanted this to, if the board has thoughts on what the committee structure should be, we're happy to adopt that. So again, no staff recommendation on this item. October would be the natural opportunity to make changes to Board Policy 3, in particular on the committees. So if there's any direction that board would like to give us ahead of that, to look at a different committee structure, or if any board member would like to come up with a proposal for a committee structure, we can work that into the changes for the board policies in October. So we can certainly bring this back, is my long-winded way of saying that.
Board Member Joyce, did you have anything else, or was that it?
That's the general vision. No, I don't have any specific amendments at this
Okay.
moment.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I didn't cut you off if you had any other questions or comments. Okay, anybody else? Board Member Edson.
So I was here before when we had meetings at different times, and then when we moved to having them before board meetings. And I agree to the comment, I mean, to have the executive or the budget and finance immediately before the board meeting that talks about that budget isn't enough time for anybody. I still like the idea of scheduling them on regular board days, but maybe they need to be a month earlier for the committee so that staff has the time to work through the committee's recommendations and adjust things. The problem, I think, before, when we didn't have them on regular board days, is that there was a lot of difficulty scheduling those meetings, and we couldn't get a quorum, and so that's how we moved the other direction. But I do think it's the devil's in the details on the scheduling, right? So schedule them with enough time for staff and everybody to absorb stuff and be able to come back with new questions and comments.
I think that's an excellent point. One of the things that we've talked about internally is everybody knows when the board meeting is. And so to try to schedule the group outside of that occasionally has been difficult. The best time to do it is a couple hours before the board meeting. One thing I've seen other places is you have a meeting of the full board every other month, and then the month in between that, you have a committee meeting. So that they stay at those static times. So in January, you have a meeting of the full board. In February, you have an executive committee meeting on that same board meeting day, third Thursday, whatever time. That gives an entire month for the executive committee to disseminate information to the rest of the board if they choose to, and then they come back in March and they vote on it as the board whole. And then you could almost have 2 committee meetings in 1 month if you wanted to, or spread them out where over those 6 months you have 2 executive committee meetings, NISBA meeting and a finance meeting, right? Like whatever that timeline sort of looks like. I agree it is difficult to do that, and I think we've run into a few situations where we gave a presentation and then 3 days later had to make a decision at the board. And I would agree that's not a great period of time for people to absorb that and ask questions. So just a thought that's out there. I've seen a lot of agencies cut it up a couple different ways where the committee meetings are in the off month where there's no board meeting. So essentially, the board's still coming every month. If they want to come to a committee meeting, I mean, they can attend whatever, but just something to throw out there.
So if I could, through the chair, follow up on that, is there not enough business at each board meeting to meet monthly? I mean, with this, sometimes our meetings go until late, sometimes they don't.
I would say sometimes there is. I would say every other month it would probably be a little more consistent on the length of time that the meeting is for, because we would have essentially a couple months worth of stuff. There are some months during the summer where meetings are a half hour, and I feel some kind of way about that because I don't want people to have to drive all the way up here or get stuck in traffic, or in Joe's case have a train issue where Sprinter's not running. But I've sort of seen the workaround of that. So I've been places where we had a meeting every month and they lasted 15 minutes. And a lot of that was just because a lot of those decisions were made at the committee level. And that committee happened a half hour before that meeting. So people would come to the committee meeting and ask their questions. And then by the time I got to the board meeting, it was, we approved consent. Yeah, here's the budget presentation. We're out of here. I like a little more robust, hey, what presentation do you want? What can we bring to the meeting? Give that opportunity at the meeting before, whatever that committee meeting is, so that they can absorb that information and come armed with questions when we take it to the full board instead of having 48 hours or 48 minutes in some cases to make that decision, right? So certainly not advocating that we, for one way or the other, and not suggesting that we don't have enough business to do that, just maybe a way for us to sort of manage that in a way where the committees have their own structure, that time's already blocked off on your calendar, and then the next month can just be for full board agenda items. And if we have to do something on the fly, we can figure that out.
Okay, anybody else with questions or comments? Otherwise, I know I have some. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so, all right. I'll start off with this item, and then I have things for because it was 3 different things that I know we as a board could potentially act on. And so when we talk about the committees, I don't know, just to talk about the reducing the cadence of the meetings personally, it just sounds like, I mean, I get it, it makes sense, but then also doesn't at the same time, just because to me, I'm like, well, it's our job, even if we do show up for a half hour or an hour or 2 hours, we do have to show up. It's every month. It's not like it's every week, right? And I think the other piece is I don't want us to get to a point where we're not acting as fast as we need to, especially because these are critical services. And I know that folks, and I know you weren't intending for that, it's just I want to make sure that we're moving as fast as we can on certain things, especially given that I know people always think government moves slowly. So if we end up moving it to every other month, it'll make it so much harder for us. I do appreciate you all trying to reduce and trying to include us in terms of our committee meetings, and I do like the suggestion that Board Member Edson made. Maybe it is stacking it, but stacking it the month before if possible, if it makes sense. Obviously, from a staff workload perspective, that might, I don't know if you can have everything ready a month ahead of time. So maybe letting us know if that's even feasible would be helpful. I don't think we should tell you to do that unless you all can figure out whether or not that's going to be manageable or not. I think the other piece around the preview of what the committees get to see and why they get to see it prior to the board. Personally, and I understand, you know, the thoughts around that, and I do think that the board still gets an opportunity to push back on if there are recommendations from the committee, to push back on that, change what folks want to say. I think the reason why they were created, predate me by many, many years, doesn't mean we can't change it, right? Like, obviously, I don't like when people say because we've been doing it, we should continue doing it, right? Like, that's not my intention when I say that. However, based on the opportunities, even before I think many of us joined, that have been here for almost like 7 or 8 years, I think I've seen that it helps because we have members engaged on certain things prior to the meeting, so they're able to help lay it up. Might deviate from our thinking, might be in line with our thinking, but it allows for us to have a bit more of a robust discussion. If we all come in not having an full understanding of what it meant prior, it makes it a more challenging discussion, or a lengthier one. I know we saw that earlier today. And so I think, at least from my perspective, I do think it's helpful to have those. I do understand hey, why are they getting a sneak preview before we are? What I had mentioned as a potential, and I think Mary and I had talked about this as a potential way to ensure that everyone's receiving the information at the same time. Maybe it's through the memos, or anything that Mr. Donaghy already sends out. So that way everyone's aware of what's being discussed. And that way, if you do have feedback, you're always welcome to share it with staff. And that feedback can be shared with the rest of the committees as well. Obviously, minding the Brown Act and making sure that we're not, and so that's why I mentioned that it should come from staff and it can be disseminated to the rest of the board. So that way everyone's aware, again, what we're discussing, what it's going to be about, and nobody feels like we're trying to take any sort of autonomy away from each board member. That's not the intent of committees. It's just really to make sure that we have robust conversation. I hope that's an avenue. However, again, I know we talked about that we can have a more tailored discussion on what this makeup and how we do it looks like. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents based on the experience I've had. So
Yeah, so one thing that we're definitely going to look at, the executive committee and the PAF committee always have items that go to the committee before that then have to be adopted by the board. So we're definitely going to make sure that that is not happening on the, same day. So you will definitely see that changed in board policy 3. We'll be able to shift those for the PAF because of the development of our budget. We will likely want to keep the PAF committee meeting in May in particular, just because we don't want to rush the development of the budget. So, but we'll probably put that in the beginning of May, and then the board meeting will be in the latter half of May. We do prepare committee reports after each committee, and that is part of the board packet in the following month. Because we've been doing the committee meetings on the same day, you see it after the fact, so the June board meeting, you saw a preview of or an overview of the May PAF committee. So there's a lot of opportunities for us to be able to disseminate information to the board, the full board, about what the committee discussed. So those are definitely going to be changes. MISBTA, the only thing that is discussed at MISBTA is the service implementation plan that's fed into the budget. But that can certainly happen maybe before the April board meeting, and then it gets factored into the PAP committee and then the full board in May. So we can definitely come up with a proposal of a committee, a cadence of meetings for the committee, and make sure that the times make sense.
thank you. And while you were saying all of that, I was just thinking, I know the hard part for folks, for all of us, I'm sure, because many of us are juggling multiple roles. It's not just, being on council. We have jobs that are paying for our everyday. So I know that sometimes being able to provide feedback in a lengthy format can be challenging. So I'm just throwing this out there, again, brainstorming out loud. If there's a way that you all could potentially, as you send it out, if there's a way to capture, and I'll leave it up to you all, some sort of feedback that would be easier for us to provide feedback on instead of us having to write you a long-winded email. I don't know what that looks like operationally. I'm just thinking out loud because I can understand where the sentiment's coming from when there are committee meetings and not being able to provide feedback until the board meeting. But if there's a way that, again, is not cumbersome, but at the same time allows for each of our board members to feel like we're providing whatever feedback we need to, I would love for us to figure that piece out. And we don't have to answer now because at all, because I understand we're just throwing things out there. Looking at the time and being mindful, there was one other piece that I know have talked about, thought about, and would be interested to hear my colleagues' perspective on, and this is the one around the legislature, and it would have to be more of a legislature change. But I know that we have our county reps, and one of the piece, and I'm sad that our county rep is not here, but one of the things that I wanted to entertain and I was curious about is if we could have it be either of our 2 North County reps that we have, because from a service perspective, it is both that are representing that particular service and that area. And so wanted to see what folks felt about potentially having that advocacy to change that. Obviously, it wouldn't be us that would be able to change it. It would have to happen at the legislature level. We just have to see if any of our representatives would be interested in carrying that. So I'd love to hear feedback on that from folks. And then I see Board Member Contreras raising your hand. And Board Member Joyce after.
Just following up on the point of advocacy to the state for that change, I am 100% in favor of advocating for that. So I think that, our service area is unique in that we have 2 supervisors that are within our service area. So I think it is completely appropriate to open up this discussion and, hopefully the board, this is something that we can put in our legislative platform and maybe do some letters to our representatives and to the state advocating for that. So I would be in favor.
Thank you. Board Member Joyce.
Yeah, I would just say if we're going to get them to open up language, let's get them to fix all the things that we want to fix at the same time. So if I would support advocating for that kind of change as well. So The other piece, just to revisit back to the committee pieces, I forgot this piece of it is I don't see our committees have like PAF has a lane. The each of the committees seem to have like a lane, right, that they're operating in, but the executive committee doesn't seem to have a lane. So I just am not sure why the same thing that our full board gets, the executive committee weighs in on twice. So again, I just flag that doesn't make common sense to me, and perhaps I'm missing some other justification. But so just flagging.
Yeah, so the executive committee is charged with general governance of the board and things that are related to the two positions that report directly to the board. So in the executive committee's purview, you'll see Sean and Lori's performance evaluations, and you'll see things related to that. You'll also see the overview of changes to board policies. So it's meant to be a general governance committee as it's codified right now. I think if there's anything that the board would like to add in that scope or change in that scope, I think we'd be interested in, staff can certainly make any changes that the board's interested in changing.
Well, and if, through the chair, if I might add that
Yeah, that's fine.
during my time on the executive committee, we also hired Sean, for example, and made those choices. So the executive, you're welcome. But it would have been very difficult to go through that process with the full board versus being able to have a subcommittee, which was the executive committee, schedule these 4 meetings and go through the whole interview process and whatnot, then bring it to the board, bring those choices to the board. So I think it does serve a good purpose, and I think it's the duties and responsibilities of all of the commissions are outlined in our board policies.
Vice Chair Sanala?
Yeah, to answer your question, Chair, where we stand on the county representation. Mary, do you happen to know, and I hate to put you on the spot, but like what's the kind of rough percentage of the other county district that overlaps with the transit district?
I will certainly get back to you on the specific percentage of population. However,
Maybe, I mean, I'd want to, maybe you can take this for some homework, more than just population, because that could be kind of, misleading. Just geographic, population. And the reason why I'm asking is to answer your question, Chair, is that I'd be open-minded to it, supporting that. But if it's like 90-10, then I think we're going to disenfranchise a very large part of North County residents for no reason. If it's, I don't know what that sweet spot is, 50-50, or, which I know it's not, or 75-25, I don't know, I haven't made up my mind what that looks like, but if it's like really obvious, like 80-20, then I couldn't support that.
yeah, so we do, and I just pulled up a map while we were
Yep.
talking. So the 5th supervisorial district is entirely in NCTD's service area. The 3rd is mostly in NCTD's service area, but there are sections of the 3rd district that leave NCTD's service area and go into MTS's.
Does it reflect population for each of those?
I haven't looked at population yet, but I can do that.
Yeah, and I think we're not making any decisions today, just to confirm. This is just more of a discussion,
conversation,
yeah.
yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up. Board Alternate Coleman?
While you're doing that homework, if you could also look into City of San Diego as well. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Do you mean from a population perspective?
Yes.
Okay.
And geographical.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions or comments on this particular item based on what we've discussed, or anything additional? Board Member Joyce and then Contreras.
I was just gonna also join you in the effort to keep it monthly. I don't think a reduction or frequency of meeting makes sense to me.
Thank you. Okay, so Board Member Contreras, and then
Yeah, I'll just say I think monthly as well. And I just want to offer, when I was on the executive committee before I got kicked off through a ridiculous weighted vote, I did enjoy my time on the executive committee, being able to really dig in. But I think that there's certainly room to modernize and maybe take a look at the scope, and maybe, the makeup of the committee, or if there's an additional representative that could be on there. I don't know, but I think I'm good taking a look at it and seeing if there's any additions or modernization that can happen to just create more efficiencies. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other last minute additions, comments, questions? Because I know we're getting up to 3:30, which is where our hard stop's going to have to be to keep quorum. Okay, do you all feel comfortable with the conversation we've had, or do you feel like you need any clarity from any of us before we wrap?
No, I think we definitely heard direction on the cadence of meetings. We will, as part of the review of board policies in October at the executive committee, and then at the full board level, we'll go through the timing of the committees. And we will look at the purview. We will look at whether we could add into our legislative agenda about which supervisorial district, or opening it up to the county to appoint whoever they would like within our service area. Yeah, I think we have clear understanding.
Okay, Board Member Joyce, you had something?
I was just going to ask if we could figure out also how to, with the committees, the marketing, like doing the work of the committee, I feel like is something that I'm also seeking from this. And that's like in the marketing space, like I do want us to have some work to do rather than, I love congratulating staff on the amazing work that they do, but the considerations we haven't had. So I'd like to have a conversation about how we set up the work plan for the year and expectations on how we do that kind of work. So that's the only other thing.
Yeah, totally agree with that.
Thank you.
And through the chair, if I could, I
Sure.
wanted to also support Board Member Joyce's comment about let's look at all the things we might want to
For
have the
advocacy.
legislature take. Yes.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no, that's a good one. And the work plan piece, by the way, we did that with our commissions at the city level. And I have to say, it's been really helpful for us to all stay in line and make sure that we're transparent to folks. I appreciate that suggestion. So this is now the CEO's report, which hopefully is very short.
I did not have one. When I looked at the agenda, it wasn't on there, so I'm not sure where this slide came from. I'll just say shout out to the staff. They've been doing amazing work. And Madam Chair, that's all I have.
Yay, awesome. All right. Board members, do you have anything very briefly to report? I'm seeing head shakes. Okay. Any remaining public comments?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. At this time, public registration to speak on remaining public communications will end the next scheduled meeting. So no meetings in August. Marketing, Service Planning, and Business Development Committee meeting will be Thursday, September 10th at 11 a.m. Our regular board meeting will be Thursday, September 10th, 2026 at 2 p.m. And we are adjourned at 3:29.